Chapter 1184. With Long Qing around, Jiao Yang wasn't a threat at all. Even though he was the first chosen, he posed no threat to Xiao Chen and the others. Long Qing nodded unhappily at Xiao Chen's words. Forget it then. Long Qing was very unhappy with Jiao Yang's provocation, but Xiao Chen's words made sense. With the current relationship between the Sacred Palace and the Myriad Beasts Valley, they really couldn't do anything to Jiao Yang. Moreover, Xiao Chen and the others hadn't suffered any losses. On the contrary, Jiao Yang had become a prisoner of the Sacred Palace due to his arrogance. As the #1 disciple, it was extremely shameful for him to be captured and imprisoned. If news of this were to spread, Jiao Yang's reputation would be ruined. Xiao Chen and the others didn't care too much about Jiao Yang's matter and soon left. As for Xiao Xing, the three didn't report it to him. It was likely that Xiao Xing already knew what had happened. The reason he didn't show up was probably because he tacitly agreed with Xiao Chen and the others' actions. Jiao Yang's provocation was just a small difference. At the same time, in Xiao Xing's courtyard, Great Sovereign Adam, Great Sovereign Domineering Mountain, and Great Sovereign Tianyun were all present. The four great sovereigns were sitting together in a circle. Haha, that brat Jiao Yang has kicked an iron plate this time. Just as Xiao Chen had guessed, Xiao Xing and the others were already aware of what had happened in the front courtyard. Great Sovereign Adam smiled faintly when he heard Great Sovereign Domineering Mountain's words. It's not a big deal to capture Jiao Yang, but since Jiao Yang is in the wrong, we can do something about it. Xiao Xing and the others exclaimed softly when they heard Great Sovereign Adam's words. They immediately turned to look at Great Sovereign Adam. Grand Monarch Aten didn't keep them in suspense. There are 2 secret realms in the Myriad Beast Valley. The Myriad Beast Pool is not only useful to the beast race, but also to other races. Since Jiao Yang is in our hands and we are in the wrong, I think we can. Xiao Chen had only wanted to capture Jiao Yang and humiliate him. However, Great Monarch Adon had set his sights on the heritage of the Myriad Beasts Valley, the Myriad Beasts Pool. Hearing Grand Monarch Aten's words, Grand Monarch Mountain immediately agreed. That's right. Let the Myriad Beasts Valley open the Myriad Beasts Pool. Each of our 4 sects will send 3 people to cultivate inside. Haha, good idea, really good idea. Under normal circumstances, the Myriad Beast Valley would definitely not allow people from other sects to enter the Myriad Beast Pool. After all, the Myriad Beast Pool's energy accumulation was extremely slow. However, with Jiao Yang in their hands, they could negotiate. Jiao Yang probably didn't expect that a simple provocation from him would cause the Myriad Beasts Valley to suffer such heavy losses that they had no choice but to agree to the 4 sects' request to open the Myriad Beast Pool. Of course, this was all in the future. While Xiao Xing and the others were discussing this, Jiao Yang, who had been locked up in a random room, still had a furious look on his face. At the same time, in addition to his anger, Jiao Yang also felt a sense of powerlessness. In front of Long Qing, Jiao Yang had thoroughly experienced what it meant to be powerless. As soon as the dragon prestige of the pure-blood dragon race was unleashed, Jiao Yang couldn't resist at all and could only be suppressed. At this moment, Jiao Yang obviously didn't dare to covet Long Qing anymore. What a joke! The pure-blood dragon race was the nemesis of all flood dragons. Furthermore, after this incident, Jiao Yang clearly understood that Long Qing wouldn't take a fancy to him. He was furious, but there was nothing he could do. In his heart, he secretly thought that no matter who he offended in the future, he absolutely couldn't offend Long Qing. He was directly locked up. Early the next morning, Xiao Xing and the other 3 Supreme Sovereigns were invited to the Myriad Beasts Valley's Great Hall. Supreme Sovereign Tiger Roar and the other 3 Supreme Sovereigns of the Myriad Beasts Valley gathered in the Great Hall. After everyone took their seats, Supreme Sovereign Tiger Roar spoke first. Everyone, we have no objections to the alliance between the Myriad Beasts Valley and the 4 great sections. However, the sacred palace has agreed to our request, so we must fulfill it. The main purpose of today's meeting was to discuss the alliance, so Supreme Sovereign Tiger Roar went straight to the point. Xiao Xing smiled faintly. Of course. In truth, the alliance with the Myriad Beasts Valley didn't have much to do with the Nine Heavens, Supreme Deity Sect, and Liwang Sect. Firstly, the Myriad Beasts Valley wouldn't ask for any resources, so they naturally wouldn't destroy the interests of the three sections. Secondly, the Myriad Beasts Valley only agreed to the alliance because of Long Qing. Therefore, the alliance had nothing to do with the three sections. It could be said that the Myriad Beasts Valley's alliance was mostly related to the Sacred Palace. Therefore, Supreme Sovereign Tianyun and the other two Supreme Sovereigns rarely spoke because it had nothing to do with them. The matter of the alliance was quickly discussed, and in the end, it was still Supreme Sovereign Tiger Roar who spoke. Since we've formed an alliance, can we release Jiao Yang? Supreme Sovereign Tiger Roar and the others naturally knew that Jiao Yang had been locked up by Xiao Chen and the others, but they hadn't shown up yesterday. They probably wanted Jiao Yang to suffer a little and temper his temper. Now that the five-party alliance had been formed, Supreme Sovereign Tiger Roar took the opportunity to bring up the matter. But hearing Supreme Sovereign Tiger Roar's words, Supreme Sovereign Adam, who rarely spoke, chuckled. Of course there's no problem with releasing Jiao Yang, but this time Jiao Yang took the initiative to provoke us. It's reasonable that the Myriad Beasts Valley give us an explanation. The three great venerates of the Valley of Beasts smiled at each other as soon as Great Venerate Adam said this, as if they weren't too surprised. The number one Great Venerate of the Valley of Beasts, who was at the Great Perfection Quasi-Saint realm, chuckled. Of course, but what kind of explanation do the four of you want from the Myriad Beasts Valley? I heard that the Myriad Beast Pool of the Myriad Beasts Valley is a cultivation treasure land. Why don't we open it to the disciples of our four sects? Of course, there won't be many people. Each sect can send 3 people in, Supreme Sovereign Tianyun said. Open the Myriad Beast Pool as compensation? The first Supreme Sovereign of the Myriad Beasts Valley didn't change his expression at all, as if he had already thought of this. Of course there's no problem with opening the Myriad Beast Pool, but now that the 5 of us have formed an alliance, I think there should be a better way to deal with it. Of course, the Myriad Beasts Valley won't shirk from giving an explanation. There was a better way? Xiao Xing and the other 3 Supreme Sovereigns looked at each other. Then, Supreme Sovereign Tyrant Peak asked, Great Sage, please enlighten me. Begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. End of chapter. Chapter 1185. Facing the number 1 Great Venerate of the Myriad Beasts Valley, Great Venerate Domineering Peak and the others behaved respectfully. There was nothing they could do about it. After all, the other party was in existence several times stronger than a perfected quasi-sage. Although they were all quasi-sages, the other party's cultivation was higher than theirs, and his combat strength was also stronger. Grand Venerate Domineering Peak asked, not knowing what the first Grand Venerate meant. The first Grand Venerate of the Myriad Beasts Valley smiled faintly. How about this? Regarding Jiao Yang's matter, my Myriad Beasts Valley will take out 1,000 divine tear pills and 1,000 sacred tear talismans as compensation. As for the Myriad Beast Pool, my Myriad Beasts Valley can also open it to the public. However, according to this old man's thoughts, since our 5 sides have already formed an alliance, why don't we open our secret realms to the public as a form of sincerity? Previously, because we weren't in an alliance, we were suspicious of each other. However, now that we are in an alliance, we should naturally trust each other. Moreover, I believe that there are many secret realms that each side want. For example, the 9 Heavens Sky Thunder Boundary. I believe that the Liwang sect shouldn't have a reason to refuse. Grand Venerate Tianyun and the others were stunned when they heard the first Grand Venerate of the Myriad Beasts Valley. They couldn't help but sigh inwardly. This old man was really shrewd. Originally, they wanted to use Jiao Yang's matter to make a fortune, but who would have thought that this old man would resolve it so easily? The so-called compensation of 1,000 divine tear pills and 1,000 sacred tear talismans could be said to be completely insignificant. No one would care about such a compensation. The old man's next words dragged everyone into the water. According to the old man, the Myriad Beasts Valley could open the Myriad Beasts Pool, but they also had to open their own secret realms to the public. It was because the alliance needed to trust each other, but everyone present knew that the old man didn't want to suffer a loss, so he dragged everyone into the water. However, there was no way he could reject the old man's suggestion. Just the Power King sect and the Heavenly Thunder Realm alone, compared to the 10,000 Beasts Pool, the barbarian race would definitely want to cultivate in the Heavenly Thunder Realm. Because compared to the 10,000 Beast Pool, the Heavenly Thunder Realm was much, much more helpful. Of course, the Sacred Palace would undoubtedly benefit from the old man's suggestion. The reason was simple: the Sacred Palace had no heritage to begin with. Since there was no heritage, the Sacred Palace was basically trying to gain something without risking anything. Basically, they didn't have to pay anything, but their disciples could enter the secret realms of the other 4 sects to cultivate. This was a sure-win deal. The number 1 Supreme Sovereign of the Myriad Beasts Valley clearly knew that the Sacred Palace had gained a great advantage. As soon as he finished speaking, the number 1 Supreme Sovereign of the Myriad Beasts Valley secretly glanced at Xiao Xing, a hint of a smile flashing across his eyes. It was obvious that the old man was conveying goodwill to the Sacred Palace. Xiao Xing naturally wouldn't refuse the goodwill of the Myriad Beast Valley's number 1 Great Sovereign, but he didn't say anything either. The Sacred Palace didn't have much right to speak in this situation. Because the Sacred Palace didn't have any secret realms, it was up to the Myriad Beasts Valley, 9 Heavens, Liwang Sect and Heavenly Saints Sect to decide on the specific. The Sacred Palace only needed to follow behind and reap the benefit. Of course, it wouldn't be bad for the Sacred Palace if they didn't agree. Xiao Xing fell silent. After a moment of silence, Supreme Sovereign Tyrant Peak took the lead and said, "The Liwang Sect agrees. Since we want to form an alliance, we naturally have to show some sincerity." It was reasonable that Supreme Sovereign Tyrant Peak agreed on behalf of the Liwang Sect. After all, the barbarian race had been coveting the Sky Thunder boundary for a long time. Now that there was such an opportunity, how could Supreme Sovereign Tyrant Peak refuse? The number 1 Supreme Sovereign of the Myriad Beasts Valley remained expressionless after hearing Supreme Sovereign Tyrant Peak's words. He turned his gaze to Supreme Sovereign Tian Yun and waited for 9 Heavens' reply. Faced with the gaze of the number 1 Supreme Sovereign of the Myriad Beasts Valley, Supreme Sovereign Tian Yun felt a little helpless. She had been tricked by this old man. He had calculated that the importance of the Sky Thunder boundary would be satisfied, which was why he had said such a thing. Now that the Liwang Sect had agreed, Supreme Sovereign Tian Yun unconsciously glanced at Xiao Xing. Everyone knew that if this matter was successful, the Sacred Palace would undoubtedly benefit the most. Forget it, let's just say it's for Tian Yu. Supreme Sovereign Tian Yun sighed inwardly. 9 Heavens also agrees. Since both the Liwang Sect and 9 Heavens had chosen to agree, only the Supreme Divine Sect was left. As for the Sacred Palace, because they didn't have any secret realms, they naturally had no right to speak. Since the 3 great sects had chosen to agree, the remaining Sacred Palace could be ignored. In this regard, Supreme Sovereign Adam nodded in agreement. According to the number 1 Supreme Sovereign of the Myriad Beasts Valley, opening secret realms to each other wouldn't cause any losses to either side. Therefore, Supreme Sovereign Adam had no reason to refuse. Everyone expressed their agreement. In this regard, the number 1 Supreme Sovereign of the Myriad Beasts Valley smiled and said, "All right, it's settled then. However, this time, only the chosen and saintesses of each sect can enter the secret realms. I believe no one has any objections to this, right? They could only allow the holy sons and holy daughters of the various sects to enter. Naturally, no one had any objections to this. After all, if too many people entered, everyone would naturally receive fewer benefits. Therefore, it was better to concentrate these resources on a limited number of people. Only then would the benefits be maximized. Everyone agreed. After a brief discussion, the Supreme Sovereigns dispersed one after another. At the same time, Supreme Sovereign Tianyun, Supreme Sovereign Adam, and Supreme Sovereign Tyrant Peak all sent the news back to their sects and ordered people to prepare for the secret realms. Of course, Shao Xing also sent a message back to the Sacred Palace, but compared to the other four great sects, the Sacred Palace's task was much simpler. Now that the secret realms of the four great sects were about to be opened to the outside world, all the chosen and saintesses of the Sacred Palace needed to do was to choose the secret realms they wanted to enter and then set off. After returning to his residence, Shao Xing went to the courtyard where Shao Chen and the others were staying and explained the matter to them. In the end, Shao Xing said with a smile, "This is a good opportunity for the Sacred Palace. This is a good opportunity for the Sacred Palace. Our Sacred Palace doesn't have a secret zone of heritage. Other than Chen the other chosen and saintesses have never entered a secret zone of heritage to cultivate. Now that the four sects have opened their secret zones of heritage, the three of you should think about which secret zone you want to enter. Then you can leave." At this point, Shao Xing's gaze fell on Shao Chen. Shao Xing naturally paid the most attention to Shao Chen, so Shao Xing also gave his own suggestion. "Chen, I suggest you directly choose the Myriad Beast Pool. You have already entered the Heavenly Thunder Realm, and the other secret realms of the four great sects are not very suitable for you. The Myriad Beast Pool is your best choice." Chapter 1186. The news of the four great sects opening their secret zones to the public naturally caused a commotion, especially to the 10 chosen and chosen of the Sacred Palace. After all, apart from Shao Chen, none of them had ever entered a secret zone before. Now that they had such an opportunity, they were naturally excited. After listening to Shao Xing, Shao Chen chose the 1,000 Beast Pool, and so did Long Qing. As for Chun Ling, he chose the secret zone of the Supreme Divine Sect. The chosen and chosen of the 5 great sects, Sacred Palace, 9 Heavens, Liwang Sect, Supreme Divine Sect, and Myriad Beast Valley, all chose the secret zones they wanted the most. The chosen and chosen of the Liwang Sect naturally chose the Sky Thunder Realm of 9 Heavens, without a doubt. This was as expected. They had already agreed to open the secret zones 5 days later. Shao Chun and Long Qing stayed in the Myriad Beast Valley, and Jiao Yang had been released long ago. After this incident, Jiao Yang had learned his lesson and didn't dare to cause trouble for Shao Chen and the others anymore. He clearly knew that his strength was no different from paper in front of Long Qing, so he obediently chose to swallow his anger. With the 5 great sects opening their secret zones to the public, the Myriad Beast Valley's defection naturally couldn't be concealed. Originally, the Night Ghost Pavilion, Demonic Sky Hall, and Myriad Beast Valley's alliance could deal with the 4 great sects of the Sacred Palace. However, with the Myriad Beast Valley's defection, only the Night Ghost Pavilion and Demonic Sky Hall were left. They naturally couldn't contend against the 5 great sects of the Sacred Palace. Everyone in the Night Ghost Pavilion panicked when they learned of the Myriad Beast Valley's defection. Even the 3 great quasi-saint supreme sovereigns were extremely solemn. In the main hall of the Night Ghost Pavilion, the Blood Moon Great Sovereign and the other 2 great sovereigns of the Night Ghost Pavilion were gathered together. The Blood Moon Great Sovereign and the other 2 great sovereigns were looking at an elder sitting in the main seat. This elder was the first great sovereign of the Night Ghost Pavilion, and he had the cultivation of the great completion of the quasi-saint realm. The Myriad Beasts Valley has changed sides, the Night Ghost Pavilion's number 1 Great Venerate said in a hoarse voice, his expression unchanged. Just like the other ghosts, the Night Ghost Pavilion's first sovereign had fair skin and a thin body. Perhaps it was because of his age, but his skin was full of wrinkles that crisscrossed with each other. At first glance, he gave off the feeling that he was about to die. However, in the Night Ghost Pavilion, or rather, in the entire North Star realm, no one dared to underestimate this dying old man, including the number 1 venerables of the other quasi-sage sections. The reason was simple. The first great venerate of the Night Ghost Pavilion was the oldest great venerate that was still alive. People like the first great venerate of the Valley of Beasts were a generation younger than the first great venerate of the Night Ghost Pavilion. After living for such a long time, the cultivation of the Night Ghost Pavilion's first great sage had long reached the end of the quasi-saint realm. Unfortunately, he had not been able to break through to the great saint realm. Moreover, as time passed, he had lost the possibility of breaking through to the great saint realm. Even so, if one were to talk about who was the strongest person in the North Star realm, the first great venerate of the Night Ghost Pavilion was definitely the strongest person. Blood Moon, who was dressed in a black robe, sat cross-legged on the main seat. When he heard the old man's words, he nodded and replied, "Yes, the news has been confirmed. The Myriad Beasts Valley has indeed changed side." "What about the demonic Sky Palace? Are they preparing to watch the fire burn across the river?" the old man asked. Since the Myriad Beasts Valley had changed sides, the demonic Sky Palace would definitely be affected. Knowing that they could not win, the demonic Sky Palace would most likely draw a line with the Night Ghost Pavilion in order to protect themselves. There was no trace of panic in the old man's eyes. Blood Moon replied, "We haven't received any news yet. The demonic Sky Palace hasn't made any statements either." The Night Ghost Pavilion chose to remain silent for the time being. When the old man heard this, he slowly opened his eyes. 2 rays of cold light shot out from his turbid eyes. The situation in the North Star realm could be said to be completely clear. The Night Ghost Pavilion's defeat was a foregone conclusion. It was not that they had not thought of roping in the Myriad Beasts Valley, but it was obviously impossible because the Night Ghost Pavilion did not have what the Myriad Beasts Valley needed. They did not have any bargaining chips in their hands, so naturally, they did not have the capital to rope them in. Faced with a hopeless situation, the first great venerate of the Night Ghost Pavilion remained calm. However, there was a trace of determination in his voice. "Do you still remember the limit of the horizon that I told you about?" The limit of the horizon was the end of the North Star realm. No one knew where it led to. Moreover, people who were above the Saint realm could not pass through it. When they heard the old man mention the limit of the horizon, Blood Moon and the other great venerates' expressions changed slightly. It was obvious that they had guessed the old man's thoughts. As expected, the old man said faintly, "The Night Ghost Pavilion has lost. Send all the talented disciples out of the North Star realm. As for whether they can survive, it is up to them." The old man knew that the Night Ghost Pavilion's defeat was irreversible. At the last moment, the old man wanted to preserve the last bit of the Night Ghost Pavilion. Although he did not know what the other side of the limit of the horizon was like, compared to staying in the North Star realm and being killed, leaving the North Star realm through the limit of the horizon was undoubtedly the best choice. At least there was still a chance of survival. Hearing the old man's words, Blood Moon and the other great venerate of the Night Ghost Pavilion could not help but speak up. "The limit of the horizon is too mysterious. It is not completely impossible for us to fight to the death." Obviously, they did not agree with the old man's decision. However, the old man was not moved at all. There is no such thing as eternal prosperity in this world. No matter how strong a sect or force is, there will be a day when it will be destroyed. Just like those great saint sects in the ancient times. They were strong enough to have a great saint overseeing them, right? But in the end, they were still destroyed in the long river of time. As the pillar of a sect, we must recognize the situation at all times. Now that the Night Ghost Pavilion has no chance of winning, sending some people out can be considered as a way to preserve the Night Ghost Pavilion. In the face of imminent defeat and destruction, the old man was very calm. After living for so many years, he did not dare to say that he had seen through life and death, but at least he was as calm as an ancient well. In the face of death, he did not waver in the slightest. Blood Moon and the other great venerate fell silent when they heard the old man's words. After a while they stood up and bowed, then left to make preparations. The Night Ghost Pavilion was bound to lose in the Sacred Palace's five-party alliance, even with the help of the demonic Sky Hall. Moreover, would the demonic Sky Hall still stand on the Night Ghost Pavilion's side? Obviously, it was impossible. The people of the demonic Sky Hall were not fools. They would not die with the Night Ghost Pavilion. After Blood Moon and the other great venerate left, only the old man was left in the hall. The light in his eyes slowly dissipated. The old man seemed to have lost his vitality, but he still murmured softly. "It seems that there is no hope for me to reach the great saint realm in this lifetime. Please add me to your collection, monthly votes, recommend me." End of chapter. Chapter 1187. With a sigh, the old man's figure slowly disappeared from the hall. They did not know what was going on at the Night Ghost Pavilion, and they did not notice that the Night Ghost Pavilion had already started to move their elite disciples. Any disciple with some talent had been secretly sent to the extreme of the horizon by the Night Ghost Pavilion. They wanted to leave the North Star realm through that place. However, no one knew how many people would survive in the end. After all, no one knew what was on the other side of the horizon or whether it was dangerous. For the time being, there was no time to pay attention to the Night Ghost Pavilion's actions. 5 days later, the secret zones of the four great sects, the Myriad Beast Valley, Supreme Divine Sect, Liwang Sect, and Ninth Heaven, opened at the same time. The Chosens who had already chosen their secret zones entered one after another. Shao Qin and Long Qing chose the Myriad Beast Pool of the Myriad Beast Valley. At the same time, the 8th Chosen of the Sacred Palace, Hu Fei, and 2 other Chosens of the Myriad Beast Valley entered with them. A total of 5 people entered the Myriad Beast Pool. As the entrance to the Myriad Beast Pool opened, Supreme Sovereign Hu Shao, who was in charge of guarding the place, shouted, "Go in. There's no time limit for the Myriad Beast Pool this time, but it's best to leave as soon as possible if you can't endure it. Otherwise, you'll have to bear the consequences." The 5 great sects had already discussed the opening of their secret zones. There was no time limit. As long as they could endure it, they could stay for as long as they wanted. This was also to give the Chosens of the 5 great sects a chance. Shao Qin and the others strode into the Myriad Beast Pool. Compared to the 2 Chosens of the Myriad Beast Valley, Shao Qin and the others were clearly unfamiliar with the Myriad Beast Pool. After passing through the entrance, Shao Qin saw a black pool. There was nothing around it. The black pool wasn't very large. It was round and only about 70 to 80 meters wide. Along the way to the edge of the pool, the 2 holy sons from the Myriad Beast Valley kindly reminded them, "The energy in the Myriad Beast Pool is very violent, and the closer you are to the center, the stronger the energy is. This is your first time here, so it's best for you to cultivate at the edge. After you've adapted, you can slowly approach the center of the pool." Everyone was already in an alliance, and Long Qing was a pure-blooded dragon, so the 2 holy sons from the Valley of Beasts spoke up to remind her. Of course, when they said this, it was more for Long Qing. As for Shao Qin and Hu Fei, it was almost equivalent to saying it in passing. However, Shao Qin did not take the two's kind reminder to heart. When he heard this, he still cupped his hands together and thanked them politely. "Thank you very much. We will remember this." "You're welcome." When they heard Shao Qin's thanks, the 2 of them returned the gesture. Afterwards, they cupped their hands together and bowed to Long Qing before jumping into the pool first. The Myriad Beast Pool had 2 main effects. One was to temper the body, and the other was to increase cultivation. These two effects were of great help to Xiaoqun. This was also the reason why Xiaoxing had suggested Xiaoqun choose the myriad beast pool. This was because compared to other things, Xiaoqun's body and cultivation were more important. Xiaoqun could only rely on his own talent to comprehend sword techniques and martial technique. There was no need to waste this precious opportunity. As the two holy sons from the Valley of Beasts jumped into the pool, Xiaoqun and the others also jumped into the pool. In the beginning, Xiaoqun did not feel anything special when he entered the water. However, very soon, Xiaoqun felt a sliver of numbness flowing through his body. It was only a slight numbness, but there was no pain at all. Of course, Xiaoqun and the others were only cultivating at the edge of the pool at this moment. It doesn't seem that impressive. Xiaoqun could not help but glance at Long Qing and Hu Fei. Just like him, Long Qing did not feel anything unusual. However, Hu Fei was gritting his teeth at this moment. It seemed like he was in great pain. It was their first time entering the myriad beast pool, so Xiaoqun and Long Qing were completely immune to the energy at the edge. However, Hu Fei was not. This could not be helped. In terms of physical strength, Hu Fei was clearly inferior to Xiaoqun and Long Qing. Moreover, Long Qing was a pure-blooded dragon. Cultivating in the myriad beast pool was like a fish in water. It seemed like Hu Fei would need some time to adapt. In response, Xiaoqun looked at Long Qing and said, "Second sister, shall we go in a little?" "Yes." The energy at the edge was not very useful to Xiaoqun and Long Qing. After hearing Xiaoqun's suggestion, Long Qing nodded slightly. Then, the two of them swam towards the center of the pool. Xiaoqun and Long Qing started swimming towards the center of the myriad beast pool since it was their first time entering. Seeing this scene, the two holy sons from the Valley of Beasts were slightly stunned. One of them exclaimed, "That's impossible. It's their first time entering the myriad beast pool. How dare they swim towards the center? Long Qing is a pure-blooded dragon. Naturally, she has no problem in the myriad beast pool. However, Xiaoqun is a human. It seems like his physical strength is very strong," the other holy son said. It was not strange that Long Qing could withstand the energy in the myriad beast pool. However, it was strange that Xiaoqun could do so. There was only one explanation, and that was that Xiaoqun's physical strength was ridiculously strong. Without stopping, Xiaoqun and Long Qing quickly overtook the two holy sons from the Valley of Beasts. At this moment, the two of them were less than 30 meters away from the center of the myriad beast pool. At this point, Xiaoqun finally felt a slight tingling sensation in his body. He could not help but look at Long Qing. Xiaoqun asked, "Second sister, how do you feel?" "I don't feel anything," Long Qing replied with a smile when she heard Xiaoqun's question. They were already here, but Long Qing still did not feel anything. Hearing this, Xiaoqun could not help but smile bitterly. She really was a pure-blooded dragon. The king of the beasts. It seemed that Long Qing was like a fish in water in the myriad beast pool. After swimming for another 10 meters, they were less than 20 meters away from the center. At this point, Xiaoqun did not continue because he felt a sharp pain in his body. He had almost reached his limit. He planned to cultivate here first and slowly adapt to the violent energy in the myriad beast pool before continuing to the center. Xiaoqun stopped moving forward, but Long Qing was still not panting. In the end, Xiaoqun smiled helplessly. "Second sister, don't worry about me. Go ahead and cultivate. Don't waste this opportunity." Long Qing nodded when she heard Xiaoqun's words. Then, she continued to swim towards the center of the myriad beast pool. It was Long Qing's first time entering the myriad beast pool, yet he was able to reach the central area directly. Looking at Long Qing, the two holy sons of the myriad beast valley had completely lost their temper. This was the terror of a pure-blooded dragon. Please collect, vote, recommend. Chapter 1188. As a pure-blooded dragon, the violent energy in the pool was completely useless to Long Qing. Long Qing was like a fish in water in the pool. The two saints looked at Long Qing enviously. They felt a little bitter. Long Qing was a pure-blooded dragon, but Xiao Chen, a human, was actually stronger than them. It was Xiao Chen's first time entering the myriad beast pool, and he was already less than 20 meters away from the central area. This made the two holy sons of the myriad beast valley feel extremely bitter. Xiao Chen had no idea what the two holy sons of the Valley of Beasts were thinking. He was completely immersed in his cultivation. The Valley of Beasts did have a very strong tempering effect on the body. However, Xiao Chen's tempered battle body had already reached the third heavenly layer, so his progress was very slow. Even so, Xiao Chen was ecstatic about such a slow progress. This was because ever since his tempered battle body had broken through to the third level of the heavenly realm, Xiao Chen had not been able to make any progress in his tempered battle body at all. After a period of exploration, Xiao Chen had also determined that the tempered battle body could no longer be improved by simply relying on cultivation after reaching the third level of the celestial plane. It required the support of an enormous amount of resources to allow the tempered battle body to continue to improve. Now that the myriad beast pool was indeed very helpful to the cultivation of the tempered battle body, how could Xiao Chen not be overjoyed? It should be known that at the celestial layer, every step of the tempered battle body could be said to be extremely difficult. Ordinary body tempering treasures were already useless. Delighted, Xiao Chen began to cultivate the tempered battle body with all his might. Every bit of progress counted. At the same time, Xiao Chen's cultivation also began to steadily improve with the help of the myriad beast pool. Compared to the tempered battle body, the improvement of cultivation was clearly much easier. Furthermore, as time passed, Xiao Chen also gradually adapted to the violent energy in the myriad beast pool. The five of them cultivated in the myriad beast pool. None of them spoke. Every single one of them had their eyes closed tightly and did not waste a single shred of time. This was an extremely rare opportunity for the five of them. None of them wanted to miss it. 3 days passed very quickly as they cultivated in silence. During these 3 days, Hu Fei had advanced 10 meters, and the two saints had advanced 10 meters as well. At the same time, Xiao Chen had arrived less than 15 meters away from the central region. On the other hand, Long Qing had always been cultivating in the central region. Time slowly passed. Xiao Chen's cultivation had already reached the limits of the advanced stage of the Tao Emperor realm, and he was not far away from perfection of the Tao Emperor realm. Right when Xiao Chen was cultivating with all his might, Long Qing suddenly arrived by Xiao Chen's side. When he noticed Long Qing's appearance, Xiao Chen opened his eyes and cried out with bewilderment. Second sister? All of them were cultivating, but Long Qing had suddenly appeared by their side. Obviously, there was something. Long Qing spoke softly when faced with Xiao Chen's question. I've discovered a treasure below. Come with me. She spoke softly to Xiao Chen, and then a strand of warm bloodline energy effused out from within Long Qing's body and enveloped Xiao Chen's body. For a time, the pain in his body instantly vanished. He knew that Long Qing had utilized her bloodline energy to obstruct the violent energy of the myriad beast pool for him, and that was the only reason why Xiao Chen was able to follow Long Qing to the central region of the myriad beast pool. It didn't take long for Xiao Chen and Long Qing to arrive at the central region of the myriad beast pool as they followed Long Qing. At this moment, Long Qing spoke softly to Xiao Chen. Follow me closely later. The energy below is extremely violent, and you won't be able to resist it by yourself. The treasure Long Qing spoke of clearly wasn't here. Xiao Chen nodded when he heard that, and then the two of them dived towards the bottom of the pool. Looking at Long Qing's actions, the treasure she spoke of should be at the bottom of the myriad beast pool. Xiao Chen didn't have time to ask, and could only follow closely behind Long Qing. Just as Long Qing had said, the deeper they dived, the more violent the surrounding energy became. Fortunately, Xiao Chen was protected by Long Qing's bloodline energy, or else he wouldn't have been able to resist the violent energy. As they dived deeper, the seemingly small myriad beast pool was like a bottomless pit. After a full 15 minutes, the two of them still hadn't seen the bottom of the pool. They didn't know how deep the myriad beast pool was. Perhaps no one had ever dived to the bottom of the myriad beast pool before. After all, other than a pure-blooded dragon like Long Qing, no other beast ancestor would be able to withstand the violent energy here. Even a flood dragon like Jiao Yang wouldn't be able to. The surroundings were completely dark, and they couldn't even see their own fingers. After diving for another hour, Xiao Chen finally saw the bottom of the pool. What shocked Xiao Chen was that the bottom of the myriad beast pool was actually funnel-shaped, which meant that the stone edge was high and the middle was low. The bottom of the pool in the central area was obviously much deeper than the surrounding pools. Such a structure was very strange. At this point, Long Qing obviously didn't have any intention of stopping. She continued to dive deeper. Her goal should be the deepest part of the central area. They continued to dive across the surrounding pools. This time, it only took a cup of tea's time before Xiao Chen saw the bottom of the pool. However, what Xiao Chen didn't expect was that there was actually an entrance to a cave house. There was a cave house here, and he didn't know who built it. Before he could ask, Long Qing had already entered the cave house. Seeing this, Xiao Chen naturally hurriedly followed. This should be a secret cave house. After Xiao Chen and Long Qing entered, there were no longer violent energy fluctuations like in the myriad beast pool. A huge mountain peak came into sight, but there wasn't a single blade of grass growing on it. However, when Xiao Chen saw this mountain peak, he was stunned on the spot, because this huge mountain peak seemed to be coiled by a bone dragon from the foot of the mountain all the way to the top. The dragon's head was at the top of the mountain peak. It should have been dead for a long time because at this moment only its bones were left. Its skin and flesh had completely disappeared. This was the first time he saw such a huge dragon. Judging from its size, it should be at least a few thousand feet long. With a look of horror, Xiao Chen said unconsciously, "This is a dragon? It can't be considered a dragon. It's just a flood dragon. But judging from its size, it should be a flood dragon that has reached the quasi-saint realm." Upon hearing Xiao Chen's words, Long Qing said with some disdain, "It's just a flood dragon." Upon hearing that, Xiao Chen was taken aback. Then, he asked doubtfully, "Second sister, is this the treasure you mentioned?" Long Qing said that there was a treasure, but now, there was only this flood dragon skeleton in front of him. Xiao Chen naturally thought that the treasure Long Qing mentioned was this flood dragon skeleton. Please collect, vote, recommend. Chapter 1189. In response to Xiao Chen's question, Long Qing smiled and nodded. "That's right, that's it. The treasure Long Qing was talking about was indeed the serpent dragon's skeleton." Hearing that, Xiao Chen asked in confusion, "What can this skeleton do? It doesn't even have any flesh." According to Xiao Chen's understanding, the most precious part of a demonic beast was its essence and blood, followed by its flesh and blood, because the flesh and blood contained very pure energy. It was not that Xiao Chen had not used the essence and blood of demonic beasts to cultivate his physical body before. However, the flesh and blood of the Jiao dragon in front of him had completely disappeared, leaving only its bones behind. What else could be valuable? Hearing Xiao Chen's words, Long Qing said with disdain, "You really don't know anything. How can a serpent dragon compare to a normal demon beast? Although it has lost its flesh and 90% of its good stuff, even if it's only left with its skeleton, it'll still give you a lot of benefit. It'll definitely be better than cultivating in the myriad beast pool." The serpent dragon's skeleton also had great benefit. Xiao Chen did not doubt Long Qing's words at all. After all, Long Qing was from the Beast Clan, so she naturally knew a lot about the Beast Clan. However, according to Long Qing, since there were such great benefits, Xiao Chen did not want to monopolize it. Instead, he shook his head and refused. If that's the case, then second sister can do it. You're from the Beast Clan, so these things should be better for you. I'll cultivate in the myriad beast pool. It'll be fine. There was no need to be polite with Long Qing. Since they were both from the Beast Clan, Xiao Chen naturally believed that the serpent dragon skeleton would be better for Long Qing. Therefore, Xiao Chen wanted to give it to Long Qing. Hearing Xiao Chen's words, Long Qing's heart warmed. She knew that Xiao Chen was thinking for her. Faced with a serpent dragon skeleton, if it was anyone else, even if they were brothers, they would probably turn against each other. However, Xiao Chen was not greedy at all. Instead, he immediately gave this opportunity to Long Qing. Although her heart felt warm, Long Qing still laughed and scolded. You really are a stupid boy. I already said that this is a serpent dragon. Do you think it's good for me to refine it? Moreover, if you want to refine this serpent dragon skeleton, you'll need my help. Let's stop talking nonsense and get ready. I'll help you refine this serpent dragon's skeleton. A serpent dragon was naturally not attractive to Long Qing. What a joke. Long Qing was a pure-blooded dragon. Was there a need to refine a serpent dragon? Clearly, there was no need. To Long Qing, this serpent dragon skeleton was worthless. However, to Xiao Chen, this serpent dragon skeleton was undoubtedly a priceless treasure. As soon as she finished speaking, Long Qing did not wait for Xiao Chen's reply. Accompanied by a dragon's roar, she directly transformed into her original form. A gigantic azure dragon appeared in front of Xiao Chen. With the increase in her strength, Long Qing's original form also became more powerful and domineering. Now that she had transformed into her original form, she unconsciously exuded a strong pressure that was extremely oppressive. The dragon's roar shook the sky. Then, Long Qing flew toward the serpent dragon's skeleton. Compared to the serpent dragon's skeleton, Long Qing's body was clearly much smaller. However, the azure light on Long Qing's body shone brightly. Soon, the azure light enveloped the entire serpent dragon's skeleton. Long Qing was refining the power of the serpent dragon's skeleton for Xiao Chen. It was impossible for Xiao Chen to refine a serpent dragon that had reached the quasi-saint realm when it was alive. Only a pure-blooded dragon like Long Qing could refine this serpent dragon skeleton with the power of her bloodline. Only then could Xiao Chen successfully refine and absorb this serpent dragon's skeleton. As the azure light refined, the serpent dragon's skeleton slowly began to melt at a speed visible to the naked eye. At the same time, Long Qing's voice sounded. Little brother, get ready. He reminded Xiao Chen to get ready. Hearing this, Xiao Chen did not hesitate and sat down cross-legged. At the same time, a white light shot toward Xiao Chen from the azure light and entered Xiao Chen's body. The white light was the pure energy that Long Qing had refined from the serpent dragon's skeleton for Xiao Chen. After Long Qing's refinement, it was very easy for Xiao Chen to refine this energy now. Long Qing refined it continuously, and Xiao Chen also closed his eyes and began to absorb it. This continued for 3 days. The energy of the serpent dragon skeleton had been completely refined by Long Qing. At this time, in the sky directly in front of Xiao Chen, a fist-sized, liquid-like white ball was suspended in the air. The white light was constantly shooting out of the ball and entering Xiao Chen's body. In 3 days, Long Qing's task had been completed. Now, all that was left was to wait for Xiao Chen to refine the energy. Long Qing returned to her human form and stood in front of Xiao Chen. Her face was slightly pale. Clearly, refining the energy was not an easy task for Long Qing. However, since it was for Xiao Chen, Long Qing did not complain at all. She smiled at Xiao Chen and whispered softly, "Little brother, go ahead and refine the energy. Little brother, you can refine it here by yourself. I'll return to the 10,000 beast pool first. I'll come back to pick you up after you've finished refining it. With that, Long Qing left the cave dwelling. Xiao Chen was cultivating in the cave dwelling. At the same time, in the outside world, the world energy in the sacred palace suddenly became violent. All the world energy in the sacred region madly gathered towards a cave dwelling in the depths of the sacred palace. Sensing the change in the world energy, the sacred palace Saint Sovereign's expressions changed drastically. Is someone breaking through? An ancestor's cave dwelling? An ancestor is about to break through. An ancestor was about to break through. For a moment, the entire sacred palace was in an uproar. An ancestor's breakthrough was equivalent to a breakthrough in the quasi-saint realm. Everyone's guess was right. At this moment, the heaven and earth spirit Qi was constantly gathering in Xiao Xing's cave abode. At the same time, Xiao Xing, who was sitting cross-legged on a mountain peak, was also glowing with golden light. Not far from the mountain peak, Randeng, Binglian, and Mengjie were all present. They looked at Xiao Chen and said with a smile, "He's finally broken through. It seems that Xiao Xing is indeed the first among the four of us to break through." Over the years, Xiao Xing and the other three had not neglected their cultivation. Now that Xiao Xing had broken through, it meant that the sacred palace had one more minor quasi-saint great sovereign. This was something that the sacred palace desperately needed. Although it was still not comparable to the other 6 quasi-saint sects, it was still an improvement. As time passed, the fluctuations of spiritual power around Xiao Xing became more and more terrifying, causing the space around Xiao Chen to distort. Then, cracks began to appear. A breakthrough in the quasi-saint realm was absolutely terrifying. Therefore, all the disciples, deacons, elders, and saint sovereigns in the sacred palace sensed Xiao Xing's breakthrough. Everyone's eyes involuntarily locked onto the cave dwellings of the 4 ancestors in the depths of the sacred palace's main peak. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendation. Chapter 1190. Countless pairs of eyes stared intently at the 4 patriarchs' cave residences in the depths of the sacred palace as some patriarchs were breaking through. It was still impossible to determine which patriarch was breaking through. About a day later, the heaven and earth spiritual power in the sacred region slowly calmed down. At this time, everyone finally knew that it was Patriarch Xiao Xing who had broken through to the minor mastery of the quasi-saint realm. Everyone in the sacred palace was naturally very excited about Xiao Xing's breakthrough because the stronger the patriarch was, the stronger the sacred palace would be. As disciples of the sacred palace, they naturally shared the glory of the sacred palace. It could be said that Xiao Xing's breakthrough had greatly boosted the morale of many sacred palace attendants, elders, and disciples. Everyone felt proud to be a part of the sacred palace. Compared to everyone's excitement, Xiao Xing appeared very calm. After so many years of bitter cultivation, he had finally broken through to the minor mastery of the quasi-saint realm. Although he was still far from the number 1 grand venerables of the other 6 major quasi-saint sects, he had taken a step forward. Xiao Xing, who had broken through, was sitting with Daipamkara, Binglian, and Mengjie in a circle in the cave residence. Binglian and Mengjie sat on Xiao Xing's left and right with faint smiles on their faces. Daipamkara sat opposite Xiao Xing and also said with a smile, "Your breakthrough this time is a joyous occasion for our sacred palace. There's nothing to be proud of. The strength of the 4 of us is still far from the grand venerables of the other quasi-saint sects, especially the number 1 grand venerables of the various sections. They are all existences at the perfection of the quasi-saint realm." Xiao Xing replied calmly upon hearing Daipamkara's words, as if he wasn't the slightest bit excited about his breakthrough. Daipamkara nodded slightly in agreement upon hearing Xiao Xing's words. Upon seeing this, Xiao Xing chuckled and said, "You're almost at the minor mastery of the quasi-saint realm, right?" "Yes, it should be soon." Randeng nodded and replied. Xiao Xing was the first to break through, but Dipamkara, Binglian, and Mengjie had also reached the peak of the quasi-saint stage. With their talent, they should be about to break through to the initial stage of the quasi-saint stage. If they could successfully break through, the strength of the sacred palace would obviously increase. The sacred palace patriarch Xiao Xing's breakthrough delighted everyone in the sacred palace. However, the chosen and saintesses, who were in various secret zones, were obviously unaware of this matter. Several days passed in a row in the cave at the bottom of the 1,000-beast pool. Xiao Chen's eyes were still closed. At the same time, the energy from the serpent-dragon skeleton continued to pour into Xiao Chen's body. Xiao Chen was like a sponge, frantically absorbing this pure energy. With Long Qing's help, it was indeed much easier for Xiao Chen to refine this energy. But even so, Xiao Chen still needed a long time to completely absorb and refine such a huge amount of pure energy. Of course, most of the energy was absorbed by Xiao Chen's body. This was also deliberately done by Xiao Chen. There was no doubt that the 100-tempered battle body was powerful, but the resources required to cultivate it were also astounding. Now that he had this opportunity, Xiao Chen naturally wanted to improve his 100-tempered battle body a little more. Although this amount of energy was completely inadequate for Xiao Chen, who had already broken through to the 3rd level, the 100-tempered battle body was still improving. Although it wasn't enough to directly break through to the 4th level, it still greatly strengthened Xiao Chen's body. Moreover, while he was cultivating his body, Xiao Chen was also improving his cultivation. Presently, Xiao Chen could clearly sense the threshold of perfection of the Tao Emperor realm. After a few days of cultivation, the white ball of light that seemed like liquid had shrunk greatly. At this moment, Xiao Chen stopped cultivating his body and was prepared to use the last bit of energy to help him break through to perfection of the Tao Emperor realm. The cultivation of the 100-tempered battle body wasn't something that could be accomplished in a day. Presently, he only needed to improve his 100-tempered battle body a little more, and that was enough to make Xiao Chen extremely excited. Moreover, the 100-tempered battle body had improved greatly after obtaining such great benefits this time, so it was time for him to break through. After he made up his mind, Xiao Chen started to attempt to break through the barrier of the Tao Emperor realm. Along with his repeated attempts, the pure energy was ceaselessly refined and absorbed by Xiao Chen. In the end, along with the last strand of energy entering Xiao Chen's body, the white ball of light vanished. A muffled bang resounded from Xiao Chen's body, and then Xiao Chen's aura suddenly rose explosively. It instantly broke through the limits of the advanced stage of the Tao Emperor realm and arrived at perfection of the Tao Emperor realm. Actually, breaking through a minor realm wasn't too difficult for the first Holy Son at Xiao Chen's level. So long as he had sufficient resources and energy to support it, and coupled with sufficient accumulation, then breaking through could practically be said to be a matter of course. Xiao Chen didn't feel too excited because he'd broken through to perfection of the Tao Emperor realm, because it was within his expectations. The energy within the quasi-saint realm WYRM skeleton had been completely refined and absorbed. Along with his breakthrough, Xiao Chen let out a light breath of air and slowly opened his eyes. At the same time, Long Qing had returned to the abode at this moment, and he just happened to witness the scene of Xiao Chen breaking through. Long Qing smiled as he spoke. "You broke through?" "Yes." Xiao Chen nodded lightly when he heard this. Long Qing smiled when he saw this. "Then let's go. There's no value in this place anymore. Return to the myriad beast pool and stabilize your cultivation, and then we can leave our closed-door cultivation." Without the WYRM skeleton, this abode was obviously completely worthless. Xiao Chen nodded lightly when he heard Long Qing. At the same time, Xiao Chen clearly sensed that Long Qing had broken through to perfection of the Tao Emperor realm as well. Needless to say, Long Qing's breakthrough was much easier than his. With such a formidable bloodline, Long Qing practically didn't have to comprehend anything. Along with his growth, Long Qing's breakthrough could practically be said to be natural, and there wouldn't be any obstructions. This was a formidable aspect of the dragon clan. So long as it wasn't a pure blood dragon, then any pure blood dragon was bound to be an expert of an area, and they were at least at the Saint Realm. Chen Shi returned to the Myriad Beast Pool with Long Qing. All along the way, Xiao Qin was still protected by Long Qing's bloodline. After returning to the Myriad Beast Pool, Xiao Qin noticed that only he and Long Qing remained in the entire Myriad Beast Pool. As for Hu Fei and the other two chosen from the Myriad Beast Valley, they were nowhere to be seen. They left first. They were unable to endure the violent energy within the Myriad Beast Pool. Long Qing spoke when he saw Xiao Qin sizing up the surroundings. Half a month had passed since they entered the Myriad Beast Pool. During this period of time, Hu Fei and the other two chosen from the Myriad Beast Valley had already reached their limits, so they had no choice but to withdraw from the Myriad Beast Pool. Begging for a monthly vote, begging for a recommendation. Chapter 1191. Hu Fei and the two holy sons of the Myriad Beast Valley had already left the Myriad Beast Pool. Now, only Xiao Qin and Long Qing were left in the pool. Xiao Qin did not say anything else after hearing Long Qing's words. It was a rare opportunity to enter the Myriad Beast Pool, so Xiao Qin naturally would not waste it. Due to the improvement of the tempered battle body and his breakthrough in cultivation, Xiao Qin could now endure the energy in the center of the Myriad Beast Pool. However, the pain was still extremely intense. Enduring the excruciating pain, Xiao Qin began to cultivate in the central area. Xiao Qin had just made a breakthrough, so naturally, he would not think about making another breakthrough this time. Instead, he used the energy in the Myriad Beast Pool to fully consolidate the realm he had just broken through. Xiao Qin cultivated bitterly while Long Qing did nothing to the side. The energy in the Myriad Beast Pool was not of much help to Long Qing anymore, so there was no point in continuing to cultivate. Long Qing could have left the Myriad Beast Pool long ago, but since Xiao Qin was still here, Long Qing naturally stayed behind. Xiao Qin did not pay attention to the outside world as he continued his final cultivation in the Myriad Beast Pool. Xiao Qin and Long Qing had already stayed in the Myriad Beast Valley for almost 20 days. On this day, Supreme Sovereign Tiger Roar and several saints from the Myriad Beast Valley came to the entrance of the Myriad Beast Pool. They stared at the entrance and one of them said in shock, "It's already been 20 days, right?" "Yes, it's been 20 days today," another saint replied. Jiao Yang only stayed in the Myriad Beast Pool for 18 days, but the two of them have actually stayed for 20 days. Long Qing is still alright. After all, she's a pure-blooded dragon. She has a natural advantage in the Myriad Beast Pool, but Xiao Qin is a human. I never thought that he would be able to last 20 days in the Myriad Beast Pool. 20 days had already broken the record of the Myriad Beast Pool. However, it was clear that Xiao Qin and Long Qing still had no intention of coming out. Another 10 days passed. It had been a full month since Xiao Qin and Long Qing entered the Myriad Beast Pool. The other holy sons and holy virgins had all come out of their secret realms. Only Xiao Qin and Long Qing were still in the Myriad Beast Pool. The more time passed, the more surprised everyone became. Just as everyone was guessing if Xiao Qin and Long Qing had died in the Myriad Beast Pool, Xiao Qin and Long Qing finally came out of the Myriad Beast Pool. During this month of time, both of them had broken through to the perfection stage of the Tao Emperor realm. Moreover, their auras had completely stabilized. Along with their appearance, the matter of the four great sects opening the secret realm to the outside world could be considered to have come to a perfect end. Practically all the saints that entered the secret realm obtained enormous benefits, and their cultivations improved. Of course, the sacred palace was naturally the one who benefited the most. It wasn't just because the sacred palace had the most holy sons and holy virgins, it was also because the holy sons and holy virgins of the sacred palace had improved the most. They had finally come out of seclusion. While Shao Chun and Long Qing were in seclusion, the sacred palace and the myriad beast valley had successfully constructed a teleportation formation. After resting in the myriad beast valley for a day, Shao Chun and Long Qing returned to the sacred palace through the teleportation formation the next morning. They were gone for several months. After returning to his cave dwelling, Shao Chun saw Qin Shuru, Tianyu, and the other two girls. Tianyu had also entered the secret realm this time, and her strength had improved as well. On the other hand, Qin Shuru and the other two girls didn't have such an opportunity, so their strength hadn't improved much. After chatting with the four girls for a while, Shao Chun went to greet Bai Rue and Shao Qing. Just as the holy sons and holy virgins were returning to their respective sects, the ancestors of the 5 great sects had gathered in the sacred palace in a short 2 days. The ancestors of the 5 great sects had gathered for only one thing, and that was to deal with the Night Ghost Pavilion. Now that the Myriad Beast Valley had changed sides, the Night Ghost Pavilion was basically a fish on the chopping board. Now that the holy sons and holy virgins had come out of seclusion, it was time to make a move. On this day, the atmosphere in the sacred palace had become somewhat solemn, especially on the main peak. Over 100 saints from the 5 great sects had surrounded the main peak so tightly that not even a fly could get in. Under such tight protection, the sacred palace, Li Wang sect, Supreme Deity sect, Ninth Heaven, and myriad beast valleys quasi-saints supreme sovereigns were sitting together in a circle. 16 quasi-saint supreme sovereigns. This could be said to be the most luxurious lineup on Luxury Island. Moreover, among the 16 supreme sovereigns, 4 of them were existences at the peak of the quasi-saint realm. They were the number 1 supreme sovereign of the Li Wang sect, Man Gu, Supreme Deity Sect, Jiang Taishan, Supreme Deity Sect, Tianju, Ninth Heaven, and Lion Zong, the number 1 Supreme Sovereign of the Myriad Beast Valley. Man Gu, the number 1 Supreme Sovereign of the Li Wang sect, whose body was like a small mountain, was the first to speak. Now that the time is ripe, isn't it time to make a move? When Man Gu said to make a move, he naturally meant to make a move against the Night Ghost Pavilion. Now that the Night Ghost Pavilion's defeat was set in stone, there was no need to worry about anything. However, Tianju, the number 1 Supreme Sovereign of Ninth Heaven, who was sitting beside Man Gu, said indifferently, "It's time to make a move, but there's still a problem that needs to be paid attention to." "Oh, Brother Tianju, please speak frankly." Supreme Deity Sect's number 1 Supreme Sovereign, Jiang Taishan, chuckled softly. "Be careful of old man Ku Gui." Tianju didn't beat around the bush and said bluntly. Ku Gui was the number 1 Grand Venerate of the Night Ghost Pavilion. He was also the oldest Grand Venerate among all the Grand Venerates in the North Star boundary. Many of the Grand Venerates present were at least 1 generation younger than Ku Gui. Withered Ghost had lived for so many years. Obviously, some people knew what level his strength had reached. However, one thing was certain. Withered Ghost definitely hadn't broken through to the Great Sage realm. Otherwise, the entire North Star boundary should have sensed his Great Sage realm talent. Even so, Ku Gui was definitely an existence that couldn't be underestimated. It was precisely because he was present that everyone had to be careful. Other than Ku Gui, the other experts of the Night Ghost Pavilion were simply not worth mentioning. Hearing Tianju mention Ku Gui, everyone's expression changed slightly, but soon, the number 1 Supreme Sovereign of the Myriad Beasts Valley, Lion Sect, spoke up. "The 4 of us together can't deal with Ku Gui? With the same cultivation level, no matter how strong Ku Gui is, can he fight against 4 people at the same cultivation level? Or do you think that at the quasi-saint realm, there are still people who can fight above their cultivation level? Winning with fewer people? The 5 great sects had 4 supreme sovereigns of the quasi-saint realm. There shouldn't be any surprises if 4 of them fought against one. Therefore, Lion Sec's words were full of confidence. Although Ku Gue was strong, he wasn't an invincible existence. Lion Sec's 4 supreme sovereigns present didn't dare to say that they could win one-on-one, but 4 against 1 was completely different. Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendation. Chapter 1192. Ku Gue indeed needed to be careful, but it was clearly impossible for him to turn the tide alone. Therefore, none of the supreme sovereigns present objected to Lion Sec's words. You're right, but what about the demonic Sky Hall? They're still in an alliance with the Night Ghost Pavilion. Jiang Taishan, the first supreme sovereign of the Supreme God sect, said softly. The demonic Sky Hall. Although the Night Ghost Pavilion would undoubtedly die even with the help of the demonic Sky Hall, this would obviously increase the number of casualties. Moreover, if Ku Gue joined forces with the old man from the demonic Sky Hall, it would indeed be somewhat troublesome. However, Tianju, Mangu, and Lion Sec's 3 supreme sovereigns smiled indifferently at Jiang Taishan's words. If the demonic Sky Hall is smart, they will definitely not stand on the same side as the Night Ghost Pavilion. I think it won't be long before the demonic Sky Hall sends people over, said Tianju. The Night Ghost Pavilion's fate was already clear. If the demonic Sky Hall still wanted to tie themselves to the Night Ghost Pavilion, it would be tantamount to digging their own grave. However, if the demonic Sky Hall wanted to withdraw now, they would have to pay a price. Let's spread the news that our 5 great sects have declared war on the Night Ghost Pavilion at the same time. Firstly, it will affect the Night Ghost Pavilion's morale, and secondly, we can see the demonic Sky Hall's reaction. Mangu added. The 4 supreme sovereigns agreed on the matter one after another. During this process, Shao Xing and the other 3 patriarchs of the sacred palace had no right to intervene. It couldn't be helped. The 4 supreme sovereigns were all at the perfect quasi-saint stage and held high authority among the supreme sovereigns. Now that the 4 of them had agreed on this matter together, Shao Xing and the others naturally couldn't interfere. With strength came the right to speak. This was a principle that had never changed since time immemorial. This point was most directly reflected in the Supreme Sovereign's discussion today. Because the Sacred Palace didn't have any Supreme Sovereigns at the perfect quasi-saint stage, the Sacred Palace didn't have any right to speak in this discussion. Shao Xing and the others were well aware of this. They felt somewhat disappointed, but this was a fact that could not be changed. They could only work harder and increase their cultivation as quickly as possible. Only then would the Sacred Palace possess an unshakable status and authority in the North Star boundary. It did not matter how they attacked the Night Ghost Pavilion. Now that the 5 great sects had joined forces, the outcome was already set in stone. For the Sacred Palace, the most important thing to consider was how much profit the Sacred Palace would get after defeating the Night Ghost Pavilion. This was the most important thing. After all, this would affect the future development of the Sacred Palace. After the short meeting, the Supreme Sovereigns from the Supreme Divinity Sect, Li Wang Sect, 9 Heavens, and Night Ghost Pavilion left the Sacred Palace. Because all parties had already established cross-realm teleportation formations, it was very convenient for them to travel between each other. On the second day after the meeting, the 5 great sects indeed joined forces to declare war on the Night Ghost Pavilion. Once this news was released, it naturally caused a huge commotion in the North Star realm. What a joke! If the 5 great quasi-saint sects joined forces to attack the Night Ghost Pavilion, no matter how strong the Night Ghost Pavilion was, it would be defeated without a doubt. Even the demonic Sky Hall would not be spared. The quasi-saint sects in the North Star realm, who had been living in harmony for many years, finally shed all pretenses. Everyone felt that the Night Ghost Pavilion would not be able to escape this time. After the Sacred Palace and the other 4 quasi-saint sects declared war on the Night Ghost Pavilion, countless people were waiting for the Night Ghost Pavilion's response. In many people's opinion, the Night Ghost Pavilion would give in the face of such a lineup. However, no one had expected the Night Ghost Pavilion to remain silent. It was as if they had chosen to accept the challenge. The demonic Sky Hall's response was even more shocking. After the 5 great sects declared war, the demonic Sky Hall actually said that they were willing to join forces with the Night Ghost Pavilion against the 5 great quasi-saint sections. The demonic Sky Hall actually accepted the challenge. When this news spread, the various races in the North Star realm could not remain calm. At the same time, the supreme sovereigns of the 5 great sects smiled helplessly. In Shaoxing's cave-dwelling, Daipamkara, Binglian, and Mengjie were all present. Looking at the 3 of them, Shaoxing smiled bitterly. I should have guessed that the demonic Sky Hall would respond like this. Daipamkara nodded in agreement. That's right. The devil race loves to fight. Everyone knows this. It's very difficult to make the devil race bow their head. The various races in the North Star realm knew that the devil race loved to fight. Under such circumstances, it was clearly impossible to make the demonic Sky Hall bow their heads. Since the demonic Sky Hall had chosen to fight to the death, the 5 great sects had also sent out their troop. This time, it was not like the previous time when they were probing the Night Ghost Pavilion. Previously on the Blood Devil continent, the Sacred Palace and the Night Ghost Pavilion had only sent out a little more than 20,000 people to test each other's strength. However, the situation was completely different this time. In this battle, the 5 great sects' goal was to take down the Night Ghost Pavilion and the demonic Sky Hall in one fell swoop. For this, the 5 great sects had mobilized all their forces. For example, the Sacred Palace had mobilized all their saint venerables, elders, and deacons. As for their disciples, those with a cultivation base above the Tao Gate realm had to participate in the battle as well. As such, the Sacred Palace had gathered no less than 100,000 people. They boarded hundreds of starships and departed from the Sacred Palace in a grandiose manner toward the Night Ghost Pavilion. Their main target in this battle was still the Night Ghost Pavilion. They did not choose to divide their forces foolishly. Instead, the 5 great sects gathered all their forces and headed straight for the Night Ghost Pavilion. As for the demonic Sky Hall, if they came to reinforce them, they would be destroyed. If they did not come, they would attack the demonic Sky Hall after dealing with the Night Ghost Pavilion. There was no conspiracy. The 5 great quasi-saint sects had formed an alliance. In this battle, they were relying on their absolute advantage to crush the Night Ghost Pavilion and the demonic Sky Hall. The hundreds of starships from the Sacred Palace sailed through space. At the same time, the Li Wang sect, Supreme Deity sect, Ninth Heaven, and Myriad Beast Valley also sent hundreds of starships into the sky. The experts of the 5 great sects gathered in the Night Ghost Pavilion's direction. At the same time, the demonic Sky Hall also sent their experts to the Night Ghost Pavilion through the Transboundary Transportation Formation. Clearly, they were planning to have a decisive battle with the Night Ghost Pavilion. The arrival of the demonic Sky Hall's experts boosted the Night Ghost Pavilion's morale slightly. However, the supreme venerables of the 2 great sects had gathered in the Night Ghost Pavilion's main hall. Among them, there were naturally 2 people in the lead. They were the Night Ghost Pavilion's number 1 Supreme Venerate, Ku Gui, and the demonic Sky Hall's number 1 Supreme Venerate, Wan Shan. The 2 of them sat at the head of the table. Ku Gui looked at Wan Shan and asked, "How is it? Have you sent away your elite disciples?" "I've already sent him away." Hearing that, Wan Shan indifferently replied, "Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendation." Chapter 1193. Wan Shan and Ku Gui were seated side by side in the great hall of the Night Ghost Pavilion. Wan Shan opened his mouth and replied after hearing Ku Gui's words. Ku Gui laughed faintly when he heard this. His laughter contained a trace of fatigue. Actually, you shouldn't have interfered in this matter. If the evil Sky Palace hadn't interfered and offered some compensation, I believe Tianju and the others wouldn't have made things difficult for you. After all, the alliance of the 5 great sects isn't solid. Some blamed Wan Shan for interfering in this matter. Actually, half a month ago, Wan Shan had personally met with Ku Gui and made it clear that the demonic Sky Hall would not betray the Night Ghost Pavilion. It was precisely because of this that Wan Shan had sent the elite disciples of the demonic Sky Hall out of the North Star realm through the horizon's limit, just like the Night Ghost Pavilion. At this moment, Wan Shan's expression changed when he heard Ku Gui's reprimand. He actually said respectfully to Ku Gui, "Uncle, what do you mean? If it wasn't for you, how could I be where I am today? I'm not a coward who's afraid of death. This time, I'll definitely fight to the death with Uncle." Wan Shan actually called Ku Gui Uncle. Hearing this, Blood Moon Great Sovereign and the others were stunned. What did this mean? The dignified number 1 Great Sovereign of the Evil Sky Palace actually called Ku Gui Uncle? They naturally didn't know the relationship between Wan Shan and Ku Gui, because even though they were both quasi-saint Great Sovereigns, Blood Moon Great Sovereign and the others were too young compared to Wan Shan and Ku Gui. If one wanted to talk about the relationship between Wan Shan and Ku Gui, one would have to start from when Ku Gui was young. He couldn't remember how many years it had been. At that time, Ku Gui was just an ordinary disciple of the Night Ghost Pavilion. Ku Gui and Wan Shan's parents met when they went out to train. It should have been very difficult for the Ghost Clan and the Devil Clan to become friends, but nothing was absolute. Ku Gui and Wan Shan's parents became very good friends, just like that. Moreover, as time passed, the 3 of them became life and death friends. They frequently went out to train together and wandered various secret realms in the North Star boundary to improve their cultivation. As they ceaselessly tempered themselves on the brink of life and death, their cultivations improved incessantly. At the same time, their relationship grew deeper and deeper. Unfortunately, a mishap occurred during their tempering. Wan Shan's parents fell into a trap and were unable to escape, whereas Ku Gui's cultivation was merely at the Tao Emperor realm at that time, so he was unable to rescue Wan Shan's parents. In the end, Wan Shan's parents entrusted Wan Shan to Ku Gui. Ku Gui, who managed to escape the calamity, took Wan Shan in and raised him. He even taught Wan Shan how to cultivate. Later on, Wan Shan joined the demonic Sky Palace. Only then did the 2 of them gradually cut off contact. Because too much time had passed, no one knew about the relationship between the 2. At this moment, when he heard Wan Shan call him uncle, a trace of reminiscence flashed in Withered Ghost's eyes. Then, he sighed softly. How many years has it been? The brat from the past has now become an overlord. I almost forgot. As he spoke, Withered Ghost looked at Wan Shan with a gentle expression. It felt like a father sizing up his child. After a moment of silence, Withered Ghost continued. Remember my words. If you can't win this battle, run and save your life. Uncle. Wan Shan wanted to refute Withered Ghost's words, but this time, Withered Ghost obviously didn't give him a chance. He shouted in a deep voice. This is an order. Withered Ghost wanted Wan Shan to save his life. Seeing Withered Ghost's serious expression, Wan Shan finally nodded silently. However, Wan Shan didn't have the slightest intention of retreating. This time, he must live and die with his uncle. It was completely unexpected that Withered Ghost was like a father to Wan Shan. There was actually such a relationship between the 2 of them. As the oldest and oldest quasi-sage supreme venerate in the North Star boundary, Withered Ghost's life was indeed legendary. There were too many memories and too many things that intertwined together to weave Withered Ghost's long life. Withered Ghost naturally knew what Wan Shan was thinking when he nodded in agreement. He sighed silently and then turned to Blood Moon Great Sovereign and the others. Go and prepare. After saying that, Withered Ghost disappeared from the main hall. After Withered Ghost left, Wan Shan also left. Blood Moon Great Sovereign and the others began to prepare for the battle. Ever since the 5 great sects declared war on the Night Ghost Pavilion and the Evil Sky Palace stood firmly on the Night Ghost Pavilion's side, the entire North Star boundary was shrouded in an extremely oppressive atmosphere for half a month. After half a month, the Night Ghost Pavilion and the army of the 5 great sects finally arrived at the Dark Night continent. Thousands of huge starships, each at least a few thousand meters long, descended on the Night Ghost Pavilion's Night Ghost continent and flew straight toward the Night Ghost Pavilion. The army of the 5 great sects had arrived. The Night Ghost Pavilion was located in the center of the Night Ghost continent. The buildings of the Night Ghost Pavilion were all black. Looking from afar, rows of black buildings stretched endlessly. However, at this moment, at the highest point of the Night Ghost Pavilion, all the experts of the Night Ghost Pavilion and the Evil Sky Palace had gathered in a huge square. At the front of the crowd was Withered Ghost, Wan Shan, and the other great sovereigns of the 2 sections. The great sovereigns were all sitting cross-legged. Their slightly closed eyes suddenly opened at this moment. Blood Moon Great Sovereign said in a low voice, "They are here." Sure enough, as soon as she finished speaking, the starships in front of them appeared in everyone's sight. They rapidly approached from the horizon and soon arrived above the Night Ghost Pavilion. 5 great sects, even if we have to fight to the death, we won't let you off so easily. Wan Shan's eyes flashed coldly as he faced the starships of the 5 great sections. His heart was overflowing with killing intent. Wan Shan's killing intent was rampant. On the other hand, Withered Ghost seemed very calm. He looked indifferently at the starships in the sky. At this moment, voices slowly came to the deck of the 5 starships in the lead. The great sovereigns of the Supreme Deity Sect, Liwang Sect, Myriad Beast Valley, 9 Heavens, and Sacred Palace had brought their chosen and saintesses onto the starships. Among them, the Supreme Deity Sect's Jiang Taishan, Liwang Sect's Huang Gu, Myriad Beast Valley's Lion Sect, 9 Heavens Tianju, and Sacred Palace's Shao Xing stood at the front of the crowd. However, Withered Ghost automatically ignored Shao Xing when he looked at the 5 of them. This was because Shao Xing was only at the initial quasi-saint stage. In Withered Ghost's eyes, he was practically a child. Moreover, in terms of seniority, Withered Ghost could probably be Shao Xing's great-grandfather. Therefore, Withered Ghost completely ignored Shao Xing and locked his gaze on Jiang Taishan and the other 3. Jiang Taishan, Huang Gu, Lion Sect, Tianju, we haven't seen each other for several decades, Withered Ghost said in a calm voice. Begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1194. Ku Gui's expression didn't change in the face of the 5 great sects' army. He spoke to Jiang Taishan and the others as if he was chatting with an old friend he hadn't seen for many years. Jiang Taishan and the others also smiled when they heard Ku Gui's words, but their smiles were somewhat complicated. Tianju even spoke. Senior Ku Gui, the Night Ghost Pavilion's defeat is irreversible. Surrender. Jiang Taishan and the others were wary of Ku Gui, but they also respected him. After all, Ku Gui was indeed their senior. If Ku Gui was willing to surrender, they wouldn't attack him and would just divide the Night Ghost Pavilion's resources. As for Ku Gui, they would put him under house arrest and let him fend for himself. Ku Gui laughed when he heard Tianju's words, but his laughter was somewhat hoarse. This old man has lived for so many years. I don't want to become someone else's prisoner at the last moment. Forget about surrendering. Let's attack. After living for so long, Ku Gui obviously wouldn't agree to surrender. Jiang Taishan and the others secretly sent voice transmissions. Lion Sect, you deal with Wan Shan. The 3 of us will deal with Ku Gui. With the addition of Wan Shan, They could only send one person to restrain Ku Gui. Even so, Jiang Taishan and the others still felt that they had a good chance. After all, Ku Gui hadn't broken through to the great saint's stage. After a simple communication, Jiang Taishan said, "Since that's the case, let's start the battle. Attack." As Jiang Taishan's voice fell, the experts of the Supreme Deity sect, the Power King sect, the Valley of Beasts, Ninth Heaven, and the Sacred Palace all flew off their starships and attacked the Night Ghost Pavilion. As the 5 great sects launched their attack, the experts of the Night Ghost Pavilion and the Evil Sky Palace also rushed out. The two sides immediately engaged in a fierce battle. In truth, there wasn't much suspense in this battle. After all, the difference in strength between the 5 great quasi-saint sects and the 2 great quasi-saint sects was very obvious. Whether it was in terms of numbers, overall strength, or the number of saints, the 5 great sects had an overwhelming advantage. Basically, the quasi-saint supreme sovereigns of the Night Ghost Pavilion and the Evil Sky Palace had to face at least 2 supreme sovereigns of the 5 great sections. The ratio of supreme sovereigns was close to 3-1, not to mention saints and half-saints. The Night Ghost Pavilion and the Evil Sky Palace were doomed to lose. As a chosen of the Sacred Palace, Shao Chen, Tianyu, Qin Shuru, Gu Lingyao, and 100 Flower Fairy. After the group killed several disciples of the Night Ghost Pavilion and the Demonic Sky Palace, Tianyu said to Shao Chen in confusion, "Husband, this is strange. I don't see any holy son or holy daughter of the Demonic Sky Palace or the Night Ghost Pavilion. Where?" One of them was the second chosen of the Supreme Divine Sect, Sharjah, and the other was the third chosen of the Supreme Divine Sect, Kusa. The two nodded at Shao Chen, and Shao Chen smiled. Then, Shao Chen looked at Bai Shi. Shao Chen didn't know much about the first holy son of the Supreme Divine Sect, nor had he seen him before. This was the first time they had met. However, Bai Shi didn't show any hostility towards Shao Chen. He smiled and spoke gently. "Brother Shao Chen, Tianyu, didn't you see the chosen of the Evil Sky Palace and the Night Ghost Pavilion?" Bai Shi asked when he saw Shao Chen and Tianyu. Tianyu shook her head. Bai Shi frowned slightly. It was strange that the chosen of the Evil Sky Palace and the Night Ghost Pavilion had all disappeared. Could it be that they were sent away? Bai Shi fell silent. Suddenly Sharjah, who was behind him, said. A strange light flashed through Bai Shi's eyes when he heard Sharjah's words. Sharjah's words reminded him of something. Since they couldn't find the chosen of the Evil Sky Palace and the Night Ghost Pavilion, it was very likely that they had been sent away. The Evil Sky Palace and the Night Ghost Pavilion knew that they had no chance of winning, so they secretly sent their chosen away. They wanted to leave some descendants of their sections. It wasn't impossible. Sharjah's guess was right. Bai Shi wasn't the only one who felt this way. Shao Chen felt the same way too. "Brother Bai Shi, let's not bother about these things for now. Let's finish this battle as soon as possible." Since they couldn't find the chosen of the two sects, they would leave it for now. After the battle, they would mobilize the forces of the 5 great sects to search for the chosen of the 2 sects in the North Star realm. Bai Shi sighed slightly when he heard Shao Chen's words. Then, he nodded and said, "Brother Shao is right. Let's not bother about these things for now. Let's finish this battle first." After saying that, Bai Shi cupped his hands at Shao Chen and left with Sharjah and Kusa. At the same time, Shao Chen, Tianyu, and the other 3 women continued to venture deeper. Along the way, they directly killed the disciples of the 2 sects they encountered. Without the chosen of the Evil Sky Palace and the Night Ghost Pavilion, the disciples of the Evil Sky Palace and the Night Ghost Pavilion were no threat to Shao Chen and the others. Therefore, under the lead of Shao Chen and the other chosen of the 5 great sects, the disciples of the Night Ghost Pavilion and the Evil Sky Palace were quickly defeated. The disciples of the 5 great sects also began to chase after them. Since they wanted to kill the evil Sky Palace in one fell swoop, there was no need to hold back. The disciples' defeat was already set in stone. As for the battle between saints, the Night Ghost Pavilion and the evil Sky Palace were clearly no match for them. However, at this moment, everyone was more concerned about the battle between the two quasi-saint Great Venerables, especially the number 1 Great Venerables like Ku Gui. Standing proudly in the sky, the two Great Venerables formed two camps. Led by Ku Gui and Wan Shan, the Night Ghost Pavilion and the evil Sky Palace's side clearly had fewer people. However, at this moment, all of them were unafraid of death. Facing Ku Gui and Wan Shan, the quasi-saint Great Venerables led by Jiang Taishan and the other 3 didn't relax at all. Tianju said to Ku Gui, who didn't seem to show any signs of fighting, "Senior Ku Gui, surrender. Look below. The outcome is already decided." Tianju was right. The outcome of the battle was already very clear. The defeat of the Night Ghost Pavilion and the evil Sky Palace was only a matter of time. However, Ku Gui smiled and said, "He's an old man. He would rather die in battle than surrender. Tianju, there's no need to persuade him anymore. Let's do it." Ku Gui had already made up his mind to fight to the death. Hearing this, Tianju sighed softly. Then, the other Great Venerables moved. The battle between the quasi-saint Great Venerables of both sides immediately broke out. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendation. Chapter 1195. All the Great Venerables of the 7 quasi-saint sects of the North Star Field were present. As the Great Venerables made their moves, a monstrous battle broke out. It had been many years since a battle between quasi-saint Great Venerables had taken place in the North Star Field, especially a battle between dozens of quasi-saint Great Venerables. Perhaps it had been thousands of years. A battle between quasi-saint Great Venerables was completely incomparable to a battle between saints. Whether it was in terms of power or destructive power, it was dozens of times more powerful than a saint. Therefore, the quasi-saint Great Venerables knew very well that their battle could not be carried out here. They could only enter the void. Spatial cracks appeared one after another as the quasi-saint Great Venerables rushed into the void. There was no doubt that if these quasi-saint Great Venerables were allowed to battle here, then everyone present would probably die. Just a simple aftershock would be unstoppable by anyone below the saint realm. Of course, if they were to battle here, then the massive Black Knight continent would be completely finished. At that time, it would not be as simple as just creating a loophole like the Blood Demon continent. Instead, it would directly cause the Dark Knight continent to collapse. After killing a disciple of the evil Sky Palace, Shao Qin looked up at the sky where the other Grand Monarchs had been and muttered to himself softly, "It's time for the Grand Monarchs to disappear into the void." Have the Great Venerables also started fighting? This battle was almost no pressure for Shao Qin because the Night Ghost Pavilion and the evil Sky Palace did not have any holy sons or holy daughters. Therefore, no one could pose any threat to Shao Qin. The disciples of the two sects were bound to lose, so Shao Qin did not continue to attack and let the disciples chase after them. Shao Qin was indeed not interested in these ordinary disciples. Standing in a pavilion, Maid Tianyue accompanied Shao Qin and watched the battle that could be said to have been decided. Shao Qin's eyes were fixed on the place where the Great Venerables were previously. Seeing Shao Qin's thoughtful look, Gu Lingyao held Shao Qin's hand and said with a smile, "What's wrong, big brother Shao Qin? The battle has already been decided. What's there to worry about?" Upon hearing Gu Lingyao's words, Shao Qin said softly, "We naturally have no problem here, but in the end, it still depends on the Great Venerables." There were no more surprises in the battle between quasi-saint Great Venerables, but it was hard to say about the battle between quasi-saint Great Venerables. This hard to say was Ku Gui. After all, he was known as the oldest quasi-saint Great Venerables in the North Star domain. No one knew how strong he was because he had not fought for many years. The final battle between quasi-saint great venerables and great venerables that would determine the final outcome. Unfortunately, the sacred palace did not seem to have any way to deal with this level of battle because the sacred palace did not have a perfect quasi-saint expert. Among the 4 ancestors of the sacred palace, Shao Xing had the highest cultivation base, but he was only at the initial quasi-saint realm. This kind of strength was clearly not enough to change the outcome of the battle. Therefore, the ones who would really determine the outcome were still Ku Gui, Wan Shan, Jiang Taishan, Tianju, Mangu, and Shizong. These were the 6 perfect quasi-saint great venerables. 4 against 2 should have been an absolute advantage, but unfortunately, Ku Gui was not simple. Therefore, it was hard to say. The situation in the outside world had been decided. In the void, the various quasi-saint great venerables had also begun their battle. Shao Xing, Randeng, Binglian, and Mengjie had joined forces to fight Blood Moon of the Night Ghost Pavilion. Although it was 4 against 1, Shao Xing and the other 3 did not have much of an advantage. They did have an advantage, but it was not very big. It could not be helped. Blood Moon's cultivation base was at the quasi-saint great venerate level, while Shao Xing and the other 3 were only at the initial quasi-saint realm. Apart from Shao Xing, who was at the quasi-saint realm, Shao Chen, the other 3 were only at the initial quasi-saint realm. Their foundation was still too shallow. However, there was nothing they could do. The sacred palace could only do its part. Although the 4 of them were not as strong as Blood Moon, it was still very difficult for Blood Moon to fight 1 against 4. Shao Xing and the other 3 used all kinds of saint-level martial skills, while Blood Moon also repeatedly used the remarkable abilities of the ghost race. The 2 sides exchanged blows, but neither side gave in. In addition to Shao Xing and the other 3, terrifying battles were also breaking out in other places. But overall, the 5 great sects still had the upper hand. The number of people had more than doubled, but the real focus was on the battle between Ku Gui, Jiang Taishan, and the other 5 great venerates. They had their own individual battlefield. As existences at the great circle of the quasi-saint realm, they were the top group of quasi-saint great venerate. At this time, Lion Sect was already fighting fiercely with Wan Shan, while Jiang Taishan, Tianju, and Huanggu were also jointly attacking Ku Gui. Lion Sect did not dare to be the slightest bit careless in the battle with Wan Shan. The 2 could be considered old acquaintances. Although they did not know each other well, they knew each other very well. They knew that each other's strength was not simple, and they could not afford to be the slightest bit distracted in such a battle of life and death. Lion Sect's true form was a golden-winged lion. His bloodline was very strong, comparable to the Flood Dragon clan. He was only slightly weaker than the Dragon clan, Phoenix Huang Yi clan, and Qilin clan. Every time Lion Sect attacked, the phantom of a golden lion would appear behind him. At the same time, the sound it made was even more soul-shaking. On the other hand, Wan Shan had already used the Great Demonic Body, the strongest Great Demonic Body of the Devil clan. However, Wan Shan's Great Demonic Body was very different from the Great Demonic Body Shao Chen had seen before. His body was covered by a thick layer of demonic qi. This layer of demonic qi seemed to have solidified, forming a suit of armor on the surface of Wan Shan's body. At the same time, the wings on his back were incomparably huge. When they were spread open, they were close to 20 meters long. With the appearance of the black armor and the huge wings, Wan Shan seemed to have grown a lot bigger out of thin air. Compared to Sha Mo's Great Demonic Body, Wan Shan's Great Demonic Body could be said to be the true, complete form. The 2 fought fiercely, but Wan Shan and Lion Sect did not back down. In the midst of such an intense battle, Lion Sect shouted, "Wan Shan, the Night Ghost Pavilion's defeat is certain. Why do you have to do this? Do you really want the demonic Sky Palace to be buried with the Night Ghost Pavilion?" Lion Sect, you despicable scoundrel! How dare you betray us? Wan Shan shouted angrily when he heard Lion Sect's words. In Wan Shan's opinion, the Night Ghost Pavilion and the demonic Sky Palace had fallen to such a state because of the Myriad Beast Valley's betrayal. If the Myriad Beast Valley had not turned to the Sacred Palace's side, the Night Ghost Pavilion and the demonic Sky Palace would not have fallen to such a state. Lion Sect's expression did not change when he heard Wan Shan's angry shout. We're just taking what we need. The Sacred Palace has what the Myriad Beast Valley needs, but the Night Ghost Pavilion and the demonic Sky Palace do not. Besides, aren't we in an alliance for benefits? Chapter 1196. The Lion Sect did not care about the betrayal that Wan Shan had mentioned. Just as he had said, the alliance was only formed for the sake of benefits. Since the Sacred Palace was able to offer even greater benefits, it was only natural that the Thousand Beast Valley would turn traitor. The killing intent in Wan Shan's eyes grew even stronger when he heard Lion Sect's answer. At the same time, his attacks became even fiercer. Lion Sect sneered as he blocked Wan Shan's attacks. You want to kill me? But can you do it, Wan Shan? Wan Shan really wanted to kill Lion Zong now. Unfortunately, both of them were existences in the great perfection of the quasi-sage realm. At their level, it could be said that it was very difficult to kill them. The difficulty of killing a quasi-sage great venerate was probably dozens or even hundreds of times more difficult than killing a saint. At the quasi-saint realm, one's vitality could already be described as terrifying. Therefore, Lion Sect was not afraid of Wan Shan's rage at all. Moreover, Lion Sect's current mission was to delay Wan Shan and wait for Jiang Taishan's trio and Ku Gui's victory to be decided. At that time, Wan Shan would naturally be doomed. The battle between Lion Sect and Wan Shan was intense. However, anyone with discerning eyes could see that although the battle between the two was intense, no one could do anything to the other. Especially Lion Sect. He had no intention of going all out against Wan Shan. This gave Wan Shan a headache. While Lion Sect and Wan Shan fought fiercely, Jiang Taishan, Tianju, and Man Gu were also fighting fiercely with Ku Gui. Ku Gui, who was wearing a loose black robe and had a thin and short figure, did not fall into any disadvantage when facing the siege of Jiang Taishan's trio. Jiang Taishan's trio were all existences at the perfect quasi-saint realm and were the strongest great sovereigns of the North Star boundary, along with Ku Gui. Ku Gui did not show any signs of defeat even when facing three existences at the same level as him. From this, it could be seen that Ku Gui's strength was indeed incomparably powerful. He was indeed worthy of the title of the North Star boundary's most ancient and strongest quasi-saint great sovereign. With every movement, Withered Ghost was surrounded by a dense ghostly aura. When he struck out with his palm, the ghostly aura swept toward Jiang Taishan and the other two like a blanket. Fortunately, Jiang Taishan and the other two were strong. Otherwise, if it were any other quasi-sage great sovereign, they would have been killed by the Withered Ghost. Jiang Taishan and the others weren't surprised by Ku Gui's terrifying strength. After all, this was something they had long expected. If it weren't for Ku Gui's strength, why would Jiang Taishan and the others be so afraid of him? The four peerless powerhouses who stood at the top of the North Star boundary, existences who were only one step away from the great sage realm, were engaged in a fierce battle at this moment. All kinds of magical powers emerged one after another, and even the other quasi-sage and great venerables didn't dare to approach the place where the four of them were fighting. After all, the residual power was simply too ferocious, and the slightest carelessness might cause them to be affected. With a palm strike, a ghostly claw condensed from ghostly chi descended from the sky, like a mountain pressing down on Jiang Taishan. Facing the attacks of the withered ghosts, Jiang Taishan's expression was calm. Golden light flashed as the God Race's ability was used. The golden light and the ghostly claw fiercely collided, and then both exploded in the air at the same time, slowly dissipating. After successfully blocking the attack of the withered ghost, Jiang Taishan said coldly, "Ku Gui, you're old. If you were a few hundred years younger, perhaps the three of us wouldn't be able to do anything to you. But now you're on the verge of death, and your strength is far from what it was in your prime. I'm afraid you don't have much of a chance today." Jiang Taishan's words were indeed true. The withered ghost was old, and after living for so many years, his strength was at the top of the entire North Star boundary. However, no matter how strong he was, it was difficult to resist the erosion of time. Ordinary people would die, saints would die, quasi-sages and great venerables would die, and even great sages couldn't surpass time and resist the erosion of time. It was hard to say whether there was anyone in this world who could truly achieve immortality, but at the very least, no one had ever heard of anyone who could live forever. Time was the most terrifying power in this world. No matter how strong you were, no matter what your cultivation was, time would always be able to crush you alive unknowingly. Take the current withered ghost for example. He had lived for thousands of years, and his cultivation was exceedingly high, but he still couldn't escape time. Now that he was old, his body was far from being as strong as it was in his prime. This was something that the withered ghost himself didn't deny. His current body was too weak, and Jiang Taishan and the other two could exhaust him to death. The withered ghost already knew this, so he was certain that the Night Ghost Pavilion would lose. Otherwise, if he was at his prime, even if he was alone, he wouldn't be afraid of Jiang Taishan and the other two. Hearing Jiang Taishan's words, the withered ghost smiled bitterly. "Yes, old people are indeed useless, but the three of you are a little too arrogant. You have to know that even if you're old enough to lose your teeth, a tiger is still a tiger." He admitted that he was old, but the withered ghost also said that the Jiang Taishan trio were too arrogant. Hearing this, Jiang Taishan remained silent, while Tianju's eyes flashed with a trace of seriousness. However, the three of them didn't have to wait. Soon, a terrifying aura suddenly erupted from the withered ghost's body. This aura had faintly surpassed the quasi-sage level. This was an aura that surpassed the quasi-sage level. This was, feeling the terrifying aura that suddenly erupted from the withered ghost's body, the Jiang Taishan trio were stunned, and Tianju couldn't help but murmur, "Great Saint Stage? You broke through to the Great Saint Stage?" Above the quasi-sage level was the Great Saint Stage. This level was equivalent to a legendary existence in the current North Star boundary. It had been at least tens of thousands of years since a great saint emperor had appeared in the North Star boundary. If the withered ghost really broke through to the Great Saint Stage, then there was no doubt that everyone present would die. The strength of a great saint emperor was absolutely enough to change the color of heaven and earth. Although there were many quasi-sage great venerables in the 5 great sects, in front of a great saint emperor, it was still not enough. This was like the gap between the quasi-sage level and the saint stage. Was it not so great that a quasi-sage great venerate could easily crush a saint stage expert? By the same logic, a great saint emperor could also easily crush a quasi-sage great venerate. Moreover, the gap between the two was even greater than the gap between the quasi-sage level and the saint stage. It was so great that it was unimaginable. Not only Tianju, but Jiang Taishan and Huang Gu's expressions also changed drastically. However, in the face of the trio's surprise, the withered ghost chuckled a little self-deprecatingly. "The great sage level isn't so easy to break through. Don't worry, this old man hasn't broken through to the great saint stage yet. If I have to say, this old man's true realm should be at the half-step great saint stage." Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1197. He hadn't broken through to the great saint realm, but was only one step away from the quasi-saint realm. He could be considered a half-step great saint. At this moment, the withered ghost's originally thin and short figure seemed to have grown infinitely taller. He simply stood there, but at this moment, he was like a huge mountain that stood in front of Jiang Taishan and the other two. Hearing Ku Gui's words, Jiang Taishan and the other two didn't feel the slightest bit happy. On the contrary, their expressions were grave to the extreme. Half-step Great Saint was an existence that surpassed the quasi-saint realm. All along, Jiang Taishan and the other two had only thought that Ku Gui's cultivation should be at the peak of the quasi-saint realm. Who would have thought that Ku Gui had finally taken that step? Although it was only half a step, it was already shocking enough. Looking at Ku Gui's slightly bitter smile, Tianju sighed silently. Is this the #1 expert of the North Star realm? Half-step Great Saint Ku Gui had occupied the position of the #1 expert of the North Star realm for thousands of years. In these thousands of years, no matter how turbulent the North Star realm was or how the situation changed, Ku Gui still firmly held the #1 position in the North Star realm. Perhaps it was because he was already old, but in recent years, Ku Gui had rarely shown himself, let alone fought with others. Perhaps it was because Ku Gui's silence that people gradually forgot how powerful he used to be. Today, Ku Gui, who was already on the verge of death, finally showed his powerful side once again. Facing Jiang Taishan and the other two who were stunned in place, Ku Gui smiled. This should be the last battle of this old man's life. Perhaps it's not bad to end like this. Come, let's do it. Saying that, Ku Gui's right hand slowly reached out, and at the same time, a terrifying aura spread out. This aura was like an invisible hand that instantly grasped Jiang Taishan and the other two. Feeling the appearance of this inexplicable power, Jiang Taishan and the other two didn't hesitate and attacked at the same time. However, Withered Ghost didn't show any reaction. He stretched out his right hand and clenched it. Suddenly, the space where the four of them were fighting shattered like a mirror. One must know that this was the void. The space in the void was at least 100 times stronger than the outside world. A quasi-sage Great Venerable couldn't break the space in the void, but Withered Ghost did it. With just a clench of his fist, cracks appeared in the surrounding space. The void has shattered. Looking at the dense cracks around him, Baron blurted out subconsciously. But before he could react, he felt as though his body was being gripped tightly and couldn't break free for a moment. Not only Huanggu, but Jiang Taishan and Tianju were also doing the same. At this moment, the three of them didn't dare to be careless in the slightest. They all erupted with their strongest power. The mark of the Heavenly Clan appeared on Tianju's forehead. A white light bloomed from the mark and quickly wrapped around Tianju's body. Jiang Taishan's whole body shone with golden light. His whole person seemed to have turned into a golden man. The dazzling light made it impossible for people to open their eyes. There was also Huanggu. At this time, Huanggu's originally huge body grew even bigger. He was originally 5 meters tall, but now he had grown to nearly 20 meters. At the same time, his skin was suffused with a faint green luster. His whole person was like an indestructible boulder. The three of them all brought out their special skills. They underestimated Withered Ghost. They didn't expect Withered Ghost to have broken through the quasi-sage stage and reached the half-step Great Sage stage. As a result, the three of them naturally didn't dare to be careless in the slightest. At the same time, the three of them used all their strength to forcibly break through Withered Ghost's restraint. Withered Ghost didn't seem to be surprised by this. He flipped his palm and pressed it down. At the same time, the ghost claw condensed from endless ghost chi appeared in the void again. However, this time, the ghost claw was many times larger than before. It was almost the size of a continent. Following the suppression of this ghost claw, Jiang Taishan and the others' faces turned gloomy. Tianju was the first to shout, "Let's attack together." It was absolutely impossible to win against Withered Ghost alone. The slightest carelessness could even lead to serious injuries. Therefore, Tianju didn't hesitate and shouted directly. Only when the three of them joined forces could they tangle with Withered Ghost. However, from the current situation, it was still impossible to defeat Withered Ghost. The three of them attacked at the same time, sending out powerful attacks that went straight for the huge ghost claw descending from the sky. The four attacks collided fiercely, and a terrifying aftershock instantly swept through the void. Even the quasi-sage great sovereigns, who were fighting fiercely in the distance, looked at the place where Withered Ghost and the others were fighting in astonishment. This, as quasi-sage great sovereigns, there were very few things in the world that could surprise them. However, the battle between Withered Ghost and Jiang Taishan and the other two still left them dumbfounded. This was because this was no longer a power that quasi-sage stage could possess. The four attacks collided fiercely. Immediately, the void was broken and a terrifying void storm overflowed. However, at Withered Ghost's, Jiang Taishan's, and the others' realms, the void storm was no longer a threat. Therefore, the four of them didn't move at all. This was a head-on collision. To everyone's surprise, the combined power of Jiang Taishan and the other two was unable to break through the Withered Ghost's palm. The gigantic ghostly claw that was as large as a continent still did not dissipate and continued to rumble towards Jiang Taishan and the other two. Seeing this scene, Jiang Taishan didn't have time to think and immediately shouted, again. Saying that, the three of them attacked again. Twice in a row, the three of them joined forces and didn't hold back in the slightest. Only then did they shatter Withered Ghost's palm. It was such a simple palm, but Jiang Taishan and the others found it so difficult to resist. At this time, the three of them were already thinking of retreating. The strength of a half-step great saint was indeed too strong. Although it was only a half-step, it couldn't be compared to a quasi-sage stage. Facing Withered Ghost's absolute strength, Jiang Taishan and the others already had thoughts of retreating. In just one move, the three of them instinctively felt that they might die against Withered Ghost. No one would believe that a great circle quasi-sage stage expert could be killed by someone else. However, it was different now. Withered Ghost should have the ability to kill quasi-sage great sovereigns. He just needed to spend some effort. Jiang Taishan said hesitantly, "It seems that we still underestimated the number one expert of the North Star field. This battle might, please add, please vote, please recommend." Chapter 1198. It seems that we still underestimated the number one expert of the North Star field. Perhaps this battle, Jiang Taishan said with a hint of respect in his tone and expression. Putting aside everything else, Withered Ghost was a person worthy of respect, even for Jiang Taishan, Huanggu, Tianju, and the Lion sect. This kind of respect wasn't because Ku Gui's seniority was higher than theirs, but because Ku Gui's life could be said to be miraculous. Who wouldn't respect someone who had such a life? An old tiger was still a tiger. At this moment, Withered Ghost had proven his words with his actions. Jiang Taishan had the idea of retreating temporarily. But before he could speak, Withered Ghost, who originally had the absolute advantage, suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. This change immediately made Jiang Taishan's words come to an abrupt end. Withered Ghost clearly had the upper hand before, so why did he spit out blood now? Jiang Taishan and the other two looked at Withered Ghost with puzzled expressions. Withered Ghost's face was even paler, and did not seem to be faking it. After a moment of observation, Tianju said, "Am I still old?" It was certain that Withered Ghost was not faking it. It was because his body could not withstand the power of a half-step great sage. Withered Ghost was too old, and his body's various functions had deteriorated. His once powerful physical body had long since ceased to exist with the passage of time. If one's cultivation was water, then one's physical body would be the container. Now, Withered Ghost's physical body was like a broken container. Since it was broken, the water inside naturally flowed out. It was true that Withered Ghost had the cultivation of a half-step great sage, but his physical body could no longer withstand the power of a half-step great sage. Normally, it would be fine if he did not fight, but after a fierce battle, Withered Ghost had circulated the demon chi in his body with all his strength, causing the demon chi to go berserk. His physical body could not withstand the power of the demon chi, so it was natural that he was injured. The three who were originally planning to retreat for the time being obviously did not need to do so anymore, because Withered Ghost's strength just now was like a flash in the pan. At this moment, he could no longer erupt with the same power as before. The outcome was already decided. Withered Ghost was old, but facing the imminent victory, Jiang Taishan and the other two did not have the slightest joy. On the contrary, they looked at Withered Ghost with complicated expressions. This old man, the old man in front of him, had stood tall in the North Star boundary for countless years. His glory was once limitless. Relying on him alone, the Night Ghost Pavilion could be said to have suppressed all the heroes in the North Star boundary and firmly sat as the #1 quasi-sage sect in the North Star boundary. It could be said that the Night Ghost Pavilion had once ruled over the North Star realm and was the undisputed #1 quasi-sage sect in the North Star realm. During that time, people like the Supreme Deity sect and the Myriad Beasts Valley had no choice but to lower their heads and retreat when facing the Night Ghost Pavilion. And all of this was brought about by this old man who was on the verge of death. Ku Gue was not the founder of the Night Ghost Pavilion, and it was impossible for him to break through to the Great Saint realm. In terms of cultivation and ultimate height, Ku Gue could not compare to the great saint emperors of the North Star boundary from ancient times. But in modern times, Withered Ghost was worthy of the title of the #1 person in the North Star boundary. Although he was not the great sage, he was able to turn the tide as a quasi-sage and firmly hold the #1 position in the North Star boundary for thousands of years. Although he was not the great sage, he had relied on his own strength to bring the Night Ghost Pavilion to unprecedented heights. At the very least, he had once become the North Star boundary's overlord and the #1 quasi-sage sect. This glory was the proof of Withered Ghost's legendary life. What people liked to talk about the most was that Withered Ghost was not actually from an aristocratic family, but an orphan. Withered Ghost had no parents since birth, and had been abandoned by his parent. When he was young, Withered Ghost had been a beggar and had bitterly struggled to survive in the mortal world. He had experienced the fickleness of human nature, the joys and sorrows of the mortal world. A lowly orphan, a lowly ant, had walked step by step to the peak of the North Star boundary, a peak that the 5 people of his generation dared to compete with. Withered Ghost's aura was gradually weakening and becoming chaotic. At this moment, Withered Ghost was like a candle that was about to burn out. Facing Withered Ghost, Jiang Taishan and the other two couldn't help but recall their youth. When Jiang Taishan and the others were still young and had yet to become quasi-sage great venerates, Withered Ghost was already the #1 great venerate of the Night Ghost Pavilion. At that time, Withered Ghost was in the prime of his life and was full of mettle. Under his leadership, the Night Ghost Pavilion had never tasted defeat. With the power of a single sect, he had suppressed the Supreme Divine Sect, Li Wang Sect, Myriad Beast Valley, Ninth Heaven and the Demonic Sky Palace. Withered Ghost's name alone was enough to make quasi-sage great venerates of the same generation retreat. Withered Ghost's life was glorious and inspirational. He used his entire life to teach everyone in the North Star boundary a truth. If one wanted to become an expert, one didn't have to come from an aristocratic family. Even if one's family background was ordinary, even if one was born as lowly as an ant, as long as one worked hard, as long as one wanted to, as long as one was willing to put in the effort, there would be a day when one could reach a height that no one else could reach. Withered Ghost was like this. He had walked out of the lowest dark abyss and stepped onto the pedestal that was the focus of everyone's attention. Such an old man made people involuntarily respect him. Regardless of whether he was right or wrong, Withered Ghost deserved the respect of everyone in the North Star boundary. Thinking back to the past, if Jiang Taishan and the other two made a move now, they could clearly take advantage of the opportunity to severely injure Withered Ghost. Even if they couldn't kill him, they could definitely seriously injure him. However, the three of them didn't choose to make a move. They just stood there quietly and watched. At the same time, Wan Shan, who was fighting fiercely with the Lion Sect in the distance, forced the Lion Sect to retreat as soon as he felt Withered Ghost's aura weaken. He quickly rushed to Withered Ghost's side. As the number one great venerate of the demonic Sky Palace, Wan Shan's eyes turned red and he spoke with a sobbing tone as he felt the increasingly dense aura of death on Withered Ghost's body. Uncle Yu Wan Shan, who was at the great perfection of the quasi-sage stage, naturally knew Withered Ghost's current situation. It was almost time for him to step into a coffin. However, before Wan Shan could say anything, Withered Ghost waved his hand, indicating that he didn't need to say anything. Then, he looked at Jiang Taishan and the other two and the Lion Sect, who had rushed over, and smiled bitterly. "I'm really old. Why aren't you going to make a move? Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendation." Chapter 1199. What? You're still not going to attack? Ku Gui said indifferently, but Jiang Taishan and the others still had no intention of attacking. On the contrary, after exchanging a glance, they all cupped their hands and bowed to Ku Gui. "Senior, please stop. You know you're going to lose, so why fight to the death? We don't want to attack Senior anymore. We only ask Senior to stop and surrender." If Jiang Taishan and the others wanted to attack Ku Gui now, they definitely had a great chance of killing him here because Ku Gui's body couldn't withstand any more consumption. If he continued to fight, he would undoubtedly die. Jiang Taishan and the others had no intention of attacking this old man who was undeniably worthy of respect. In any case, the outcome was already decided and Ku Gui didn't have much time left. As such, they might as well give this legendary old man a dignified ending. But hearing this, Ku Gui replied with a smile. "You four brats, this old man already expected this result. How could this old man not know his own body? This old man has fought countless battles in his life. When I was young, I fought in the streets to fill my stomach. When I was a little older, I stepped onto the martial path. In order to improve, I fought with cultivators. Later on, I became the holy son of the Night Ghost Pavilion, a great sovereign, and finally the number one great sovereign. This old man has encountered too many opponents. After fighting for a lifetime, this old man doesn't want to see this old man surrender before he dies. But since the four of you aren't willing to attack, then let this old man do it." Saying that, Ku Gui forcibly circulated the last of his strength to counterattack before he died. Seeing this, the expressions of Jiang Taishan and the others changed slightly, and they all secretly began to be on guard. Although Withered Ghost was on the verge of death, no one would dare to underestimate his counterattack before his death. While guarding against Ku Gui's attack, Tianju asked, "Senior, do you really want to continue?" Everyone knew the current condition of Withered Ghost's body. Even if he could unleash another powerful attack, he would die without a doubt. Ku Gui didn't answer Tianju's question. Wan Shan, who was standing next to Ku Gui, shouted with bloodshot eyes and a hoarse voice, "Uncle, let me do it. I'll destroy these four guys." Wan Shan also didn't want Ku Gui to continue, but Ku Gui said indifferently, "Shan, don't be foolish. Shanzi, don't do anything stupid and don't hold grudges. Just live well. This is my life. No matter how glorious a person's life is, there will be an end. Today is the end of this old man." At first, Wan Shan didn't understand what Ku Gui's words meant, but as soon as he heard these words, he felt a spatial force instantly enveloping him. He was not the only one who was affected. The other quasi-saint great venerables from the Night Ghost Pavilion and the Evil Sky Palace were also enveloped by the spatial energy. Originally, they were still in the midst of a fierce battle. However, as soon as the spatial energy appeared, both sides stopped fighting in confusion. Regardless of whether it was the supreme venerables of the Night Ghost Pavilion or the Evil Sky Palace, or the supreme venerables of the 5 great sects, all of them stopped fighting. They didn't know what the power of space represented, but at this moment, Jiang Taishan and the other 3 standing in front of Ku Gui changed their expressions. Ancient Desolation even shouted. Of the 2, only the Great Sage, or at least a half-step Great Sage, could perform spatial transfer. The most iconic thing about the Great Sage realm was the ability to control spatial power. Seeing clearly was controlling, not comprehending. Saints and quasi-saints had only comprehended spatial power, and they had only scratched the surface. The only thing they could do was open up a small space or tear space to travel through the void. The Great Sage had already mastered spatial power. Spatial transfer could be regarded as a teleportation formation. It could teleport people to any place as long as they didn't exceed the distance. They could see that Ku Gui was performing spatial transfer. The great to 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 the great. Clearly, Ku Gui wanted to use the last of his strength to send them away at the last moment. Realizing this, Mangu and Lionzone wanted to make a move, but they were stopped by Jiang Taishan and Tianju. Tianju sighed and shook his head. Forget it. Let him do as he pleases. He didn't hesitate to use the last of his strength to send the great to the great to the great to the great. Jiang Taishan and Tianju gave up on stopping him. Ku Gui smiled when he saw the change in Jiang Taishan's and the other 3's expressions. Then, the figures of Wan Shan, the Night Ghost Pavilion, and the Evil Sky Palace's great sovereigns began to float. Clearly, the space transmission had begun. Just a second before they were about to be transferred away, Ku Gui's voice sounded in their ears. Everyone, everything in the world is fated. There is no race in the world that can prosper forever. Although the Evil Sky Palace and the Night Ghost Pavilion have perished today, this old man believes that one day, the Night Ghost Pavilion and the Evil Sky Palace will rise again. Everyone, have a safe journey. Wan Shan and the great to the great to the great to the great to be transferred away. In order to send them away, Ku Gui had used up the last of his strength. After spitting out 3 mouthfuls of blood, Ku Gui had reached the end. The light in his eyes gradually faded, but before he died, Ku Gui looked at Jiang Taishan and the others. He even glanced at Xiao Xing in the distance. His lips curved into a smile as he murmured in a hoarse voice. You can sing. Let me take the stage. Don't laugh at the romance. Don't laugh at the absurdity of others. I once asked about the Golden Age. I once sang about the rise and fall. The Tao is emotionless, the Tao is emotional. How do you think? Speaking of this, Ku Gui spat out another mouthful of blood. He was already on the verge of death. The scenery in front of him gradually blurred, but at the last moment, Ku Gui said these words. It's time to end. Every era will have its own heroes, and this old man's era has passed. Facing death, Ku Gui calmly chose to face it. Perhaps he also felt that he no longer belonged to this era. After all, the people who were still active in this era, such as Jiang Taishan, Mangu, and Tianju, were all Ku Gui's descendants, not to mention the new generation of saints like Shaoqun. As for those from the same era as Withered Ghost, they were all dead. Only Withered Ghost had remained standing, but now it was time for him to leave. How could a remnant of an era continue to sit in a high position and prevent the younger generation from ascending? Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1200. In every era there would be a group of people who would lead the way, and in this group of people, there would eventually be a hero who would lead the generation. However, with the passing of generations, legends would eventually come to an end. At this moment, in front of Jiang Taishan and the other great sovereigns of the 5 great sects, Ku Gui, the legend of 2 generations, had fallen. His eyes were closed, but there was a smile on his face. A legend. Even in death, Ku Gui had never retreated. In the face of battle, Ku Gui looked down on everything. His only defeat was today, his death. Jiang Taishan and the other 3 great sovereigns bowed to Ku Gui's corpse from the bottom of their hearts because of Ku Gui's last words. "Will I appear after you finish singing?" Tianju couldn't help but sigh. Ku Gui had truly seen through everything. The old would eventually leave the stage, and the new generation would naturally be in charge of the new generation to write their own legends. As Jiang Taishan and the other 3 great sovereigns thought to themselves, the surrounding great sovereigns of the 5 great sects, including Shao Xing and the others, also bowed respectfully to Ku Gui. Then, Tianju took the initiative to step forward and collect Ku Gui's corpse. How could such a legend be left in the wilderness? Tianju wanted to personally bury him. With Ku Gui dead, everything was a foregone conclusion. Although the great sovereigns of the Night Ghost Pavilion and Evil Sky Palace had escaped, what could a mere 5 people do? There was no need to worry. The battle in the void had ended, and when the great sovereigns once again appeared in the sky above the Night Ghost Pavilion, the battle in the outside world had already ended. The experts of the Night Ghost Pavilion and Evil Sky Palace had either died or surrendered. Moreover, the 5 great sects had already gathered those who had surrendered to watch over them. The battle in the outside world had already ended, and Shao Chun and the other saints and saintesses were now gathered together. Seeing the great sovereigns walk out of the void, the first saint of the Supreme Divine Sect, Bai Shi, smiled. "Looks like it's over." Since the great sovereigns of the 5 great sects had appeared, but the great sovereigns of the Night Ghost Pavilion and Evil Sky Palace had not appeared, it was clear that the result had already been decided. The disciples of the 5 great sects cheered. On the other hand, the disciples of the Night Ghost Pavilion and the Evil Sky Palace were ashen-faced. Even the Supreme Venerable had been defeated. It seemed like there was nothing they could do. He didn't mention anything about what had happened in the void. Those things were at the level of great venerables. Even the holy sons and holy daughters of the various sects weren't qualified to know about it. He immediately announced the destruction of the Night Ghost Pavilion and the Demonic Sky Palace. At the same time, Jiang Taishan and the other 3 also announced that the cultivators of the Night Ghost Pavilion and the Demonic Sky Palace who had surrendered would be crippled and allowed to leave. The withered ghost might be one of the reasons why he didn't kill these people. However, not killing them didn't mean that he was letting them go. If he destroyed their cultivation, these people would become useless. Even if he let them go, it wouldn't be a big deal. After all, after a few decades, these people would become a pile of soil and wouldn't be a threat anymore. Hearing the orders of Jiang Taishan and the other 3, the disciples of the Night Ghost Pavilion and Evil Sky Palace were all stunned. The people of the 5 great sects did not hold back and crippled their cultivations one by one. The aftermath of the battle was carried out in an orderly manner. The people of the 5 great sects directly moved into the Night Ghost Pavilion. Now that the battle was over, it was time to distribute the spoils. The distribution of the spoils had nothing to do with the 10,000 Beast Valley. After all, when they first formed the alliance, the 10,000 Beast Valley had already reached an agreement with the Sacred Palace and the other 4 sects that they wouldn't take any resources from the Night Ghost Pavilion or the Demonic Sky Palace. They only wanted a promise from the Sacred Palace. The 4 sects naturally couldn't divide the resources of the Night Ghost Pavilion and the Demonic Sky Palace in a short period of time. Before the distribution, they first had to send people to investigate how many resources the 2 sects had. Therefore, the 5 great sects sent a group of people to the Demonic Sky Palace on the same day. A total of 8 quasi-saint great venerables led the group, including the number 1 great venerate of the 10,000 Beast Valley, the Lion sect. This was to guard against any sudden attacks from Wan Shan and the others. The distribution of the spoils would take some time. During this time, everyone would have to stay in the Night Ghost Pavilion. As the number 1 holy son of the Night Ghost Pavilion, Xiao Chen was naturally assigned a courtyard to stay temporarily. At the same time, the other holy sons of the 5 great sects received the same treatment. 3 days had passed since the end of the battle. The post-battle security was more or less done. The disciples and experts of the 2 great sects had their cultivations crippled and were sent to the most remote place in the North Star world. They were left to fend for themselves. Xiao Chen wasn't worried about the Night Ghost Pavilion and the Demonic Sky Palace's disciples, nor did he pay much attention to them. On this day, Xiao Chen, Qin Shuru, the 4 girls, and the other holy sons and holy daughters of the sacred palace sat together. The battle was finally over. It was rare for everyone to be able to relax as they drank and chatted. At this moment, Bai Yi took a sip of wine and said in a relaxed manner, "It's finally over. The North Star world should be able to enjoy some peace for a while." "Yes, but we can't relax. There is still a gap in strength between us and the holy sons and holy daughters of the other sections. We have to make up for it as soon as possible. We can't always let senior brother Xiao Chen and the others handle everything. We are also holy sons and holy daughters of the sacred palace," said the 9th holy daughter, Yun Chuan. Compared to the holy sons and holy daughters of the other 4 great quasi-sage sects, apart from Xiao Chen, Chun Ling, Long Qing, and Chen Yu, there was indeed a gap in strength between the holy sons and holy daughters of the sacred palace. This gap had to be made up for as soon as possible. No one objected to Yun Chuan's words. Only the Azure Emperor said indifferently, "Junior sister Yun is right. However, after this battle, the sacred palace should have a secret realm. When that time comes, as long as we have time, I believe that the holy sons of the sacred palace won't be inferior to any of the other sections. At the end of the day, the holy sons and holy daughters of the sacred palace were weak because of their lack of foundation. It wasn't just their personal foundation that was lacking, but the sacred palace's foundation was also lacking because the sacred palace had no heritage. If the sacred palace's foundation could reach the level of the other quasi-sage sects, the Azure Emperor and the others would definitely be able to catch up with the holy sons and holy daughters of the other sections. In the past, they didn't have this qualification. However, after this battle, the sacred palace would definitely have its own secret realm. Everyone was overjoyed when they heard the Azure Emperor's words. A secret realm was what the sacred palace needed the most now. However, unlike everyone else, Xiao Chen didn't look too happy. This was because Xiao Chen knew very well that the process of distributing the benefits wouldn't be that simple. They used to have a common enemy. Now that the Night Ghost Pavilion and the Evil Sky Palace had been destroyed, there were no longer any threats. Naturally, there would be conflict. Unfortunately, the Sacred Palace was now in a weaker position, especially when it came to the Quasi-Saint Supreme Venerables. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1201. Originally, the alliance of the 5 great sects was driven by benefit. Previously, there was still the external threat of the Night Ghost Pavilion and the Evil Sky Palace. However, now that the Night Ghost Pavilion and the Evil Sky Palace had been declared dead, there was no external threat. At the same time, there was also the distribution of benefits. This matter would not be simple. Birds die in pursuit of food and men die in pursuit of wealth. Therefore, it was not certain whether the Sacred Palace would be able to obtain a relatively fair share of benefits this time. After all, there was indeed a huge gap between the Sacred Palace and the other 4 great sects at the quasi-saint level. Jiang Taishan, Tianju, Mangu, and Shizong were all existences at the great circle of the quasi-saint stage. On the other hand, the strongest person in the sacred palace, Shaoxing, was only at the initial quasi-saint stage. If their strength was not equal, they would naturally be bullied. Xiao Chen was not optimistic about the distribution of benefits this time, but it was not as if there was no solution, and this solution naturally lay with Tian Yu and Long Qing. One of them was the number 1 holy girl of the 9 heavens, while the other was a pure-blooded dragon. For the 9 heavens and the 1,000-beast valley, Tian Yu and Long Qing's words could not be ignored. Therefore, if they could reach some kind of agreement with the 2 holy girls and the 1,000-beast valley, with the help of these 2 great sects, the sacred palace would not suffer too much in the distribution of benefit. However, the 1,000-beast valley would be fine. After all, they would not participate in the distribution of benefits between the Night Ghost Pavilion and the Evil Sky Palace. In addition, with Long Qing's persuasion, the 1,000-beast valley would very likely agree, but the same could not be said for the 9 heavens. The reason was very simple. The 9 heavens also had to consider their own benefit. If the sacred palace got a bigger share, the 9 heavens would naturally get less benefit. After all, there was only so much of the pie. The 9 heavens might be a little difficult to deal with, but it was not impossible. Everything still depended on Tian Yu's status in the hearts of the 9 heavens' supreme sovereigns. If Tian Yu's status was high enough, the 9 heavens' supreme sovereigns might consider giving up a portion of the benefits to the sacred palace. However, Xiao Chen obviously wouldn't say these words out loud. He could only take some time to discuss it with Tianyue and Long Qing. At the same time, he also had to tell Shaoxing and the other 3 about his thoughts. Everyone was discussing the division of benefit. At the same time, they all felt that there shouldn't be any major battles in the North Star realm for a long time. They should be able to maintain peace for a period of time. However, no one had expected that such peace would not last long. Of course, this was no longer something that they could control. Even Jiang Taishan, who was at the great perfection of the quasi-saint realm, could not control it because such chaos did not originate from within the North Star domain. While everyone was chatting and drinking, far away from the North Star realm, on an incomparably huge continent. In terms of size, this continent was at least 5 or 6 times larger than the entire North Star realm. A continent that was 5 or 6 times larger than the entire North Star realm. What kind of concept was this? One must know that the North Star realm's surface area included the endless starry sky. The total surface area of the various continents of the North Star realm was probably not even 1/10 of the total surface area of the North Star realm. However, even so, the surface area of this continent was still 5 to 6 times the total area of the North Star boundary. One could imagine just how big this continent was. It was simply so big that it made one's hair stand on end. At the same time, the spiritual energy of heaven and earth on this continent was also extremely dense. It was practically comparable to some low-level cultivation secret realms. At this time, in a mountain range on this continent, a group of youths had gathered by a vast lake. If Xiao Chen was here, he would definitely recognize these people. These people were the elite disciples of the Night Ghost Pavilion, and Mo Xie was among them. They had escaped from the North Star realm's horizon and experienced countless dangers along the way before finally arriving on this continent. Many people had died along the way, including 3 chosen. Now, of the 6 chosen of the Night Ghost Pavilion, only Mo Xie, Hao Zong, and Gu Chang'e were still alive. As for the other disciples, nearly 80% of them had died. Nearly 1,000 people had passed through the horizon together, but now less than 100 people had safely arrived on this continent. Mo Xie's eyes were overflowing with killing intent as he looked at the Night Ghost Pavilion's less than 100 disciples before him. Xiao Chen, Sacred Palace, just you wait. One day, I will slaughter my way back to the North Star realm and make you all regret this. Mo Xie was still thinking about slaughtering his way back to the North Star realm, but this wish of his was destined to never come true. At the center of this continent, on a towering mountain peak that pierced through the clouds, there was a large hall at the top of the mountain. This hall looked like it had just been built, and dozens of figures were currently sitting cross-legged in the hall. The owners of these figures came from different clans. There were humans, beasts, ghosts, deities, barbarians, and even many other clans that did not exist in the North Star realm. It was already shocking that so many powerhouses from different clans had gathered in one place. However, what was even more shocking was that the dozens of figures in this hall were all Great Sage realm cultivations without exception. Dozens of the Great Sage were almost legendary existences in the North Star realm. At this moment, there were dozens of them gathered in this small hall. The hall was a little dim. At this moment, the Great Sage of the Sacred Clan said faintly, "There has been a lot of activity recently. It seems that the prophecy is really about to come true. After being together for a long time, they will part, and after being apart for a long time, they will come back together? It seems like that is indeed the case," a great saint from the Ghost Clan said softly when he heard that. "If this day comes, it will be chaos. I'm afraid the central world will experience another great purge. This is very normal and we can't stop it. I think we can start preparing. This is the will of the heavens and no one can defy it. Moreover, this may not be a bad thing for our 100 clans." "That's right. Anyway, we have been fighting for so many years. It's meaningless to fight on a small scale. Since the will of the heavens wants the 100 clan war to break out, then let's leave it to fate. I wonder who will become the king of the 100 clans this time." The dozens of the Great Sage spoke one after another. No one knew what they were talking about, but from their words, this continent seemed to be called the Central World. Moreover, something big was about to happen, and it could not be stopped. North Star Realm, South Star Realm, East Star Realm, West Star Realm, 4 Great Star Realms, plus the Central World. It seems that this is really interesting. After some discussion, the Great Sage of the Human Clan chuckled softly. "Seeking collection, seeking monthly votes, seeking recommendation." Chapter 1202. The Great Sage's words were incomprehensible to outsiders, but the North Star boundary, South Star boundary, East Star boundary, West Star boundary, and the Central World that the human race Great Sage mentioned at the end made some guesses. But even if he had guessed this, he was still confused. But no matter what, this continent that was 5 or 6 times larger than the entire North Star realm, which was also the so-called Central World, was indeed ridiculously strong. The Great Sage, who was already known as a legend in the North Star boundary, was actually gathered in a small hall here. What kind of concept was this? It should be known that any one of the dozens of the Great Sage present was enough to destroy the North Star boundary. Even if all the quasi-sage great sovereigns in the North Star boundary joined forces, they would still not be a match for one the Great Sage, not to mention that there were even more half-step great saints and quasi-sage great sovereigns under the Great Sage. This was simply terrifying to the extreme. Of course, Shao Chun and the others knew nothing about the Central World, let alone the unstoppable thing that the Great Sage was talking about and the so-called 100 Race War. At this time, Shao Chun and the others were still staying in the Night Ghost Pavilion. Half a month had passed since the battle. During this time, the various industries and resources under the Night Ghost Pavilion and the Evil Sky Palace had been accounted for one by one. Now it was time to divide the benefit. Because he had long expected that the division of benefits this time would not be very smooth, Shao Chun had already told Shao Sheng and the others his thoughts during this period. Shao Sheng and the others naturally agreed with this. Therefore, Long Qing and Tian Yu went to visit the quasi-sage great sovereigns of the Valley of Beasts and Ninth Heaven respectively. Just as Shao Chun had expected, the Valley of Beasts agreed to help the Sacred Palace without much effort, allowing the Sacred Palace to obtain a relatively equal division of benefits. It was not strange for the Myriad Beasts Valley to be so straightforward. After all, the Myriad Beasts Valley did not participate in the distribution of benefits between the Night Ghost Pavilion and the Evil Sky Palace. Therefore, the Myriad Beasts Valley did not care who received more and who received less. In addition, Long Qing had personally visited them and made some other promises. Naturally, the Wan Beasts Valley was willing to help. After all, there was no loss for the Wan Beasts Valley. The 10,000 Beasts Valley agreed, but just the 10,000 Beasts Valley alone wasn't enough. They still needed to see what Nine Heavens wanted. Compared to the Myriad Beasts Valley, Nine Heavens was a bit more difficult to deal with. Even if Tianyu personally asked, Tianju and the other two great sovereigns of Nine Heavens didn't immediately agree. The reason was very simple. The Sacred Palace wanted a bigger share of the benefit. As a result, Nine Heavens' interests would naturally be infringed. Although it wasn't much, it wasn't something Nine Heavens was happy to see. Nine Heavens was hesitant. In the end, Xiao Chen and Tianyu visited them together. After an entire day of discussion, Nine Heavens finally agreed. They reached an agreement with Nine Heavens. Nine Heavens and the Myriad Beasts Valley would help the Sacred Palace obtain at least 2 secret zones. However, Nine Heavens had a condition. For the next 100 years, the Sacred Palace had to unconditionally give Nine Heavens 3 spots to cultivate in these secret zones every year. To put it bluntly, Nine Heavens would help the Sacred Palace obtain at least 2 secret zones. However, these secret zones would be shared by both the Sacred Palace and Nine Heavens for the next 100 years. Nine Heavens would have 3 spots every year. The Sacred Palace did not refuse Nine Heavens' request. It wasn't that they didn't want to refuse, but that they couldn't. After successfully persuading Nine Heavens and the Myriad Beasts Valley, the members of the 5 great sects finally gathered to discuss the division of benefits between the Night Ghost Pavilion and the Evil Sky Hall. Xiao Chen naturally didn't have the qualifications to participate in a meeting of this level. However, Xiao Chen wasn't too worried about the outcome because he had already made sufficient preparations. With Nine Heavens and the Myriad Beasts Valley's help, he believed the Supreme Divine Sect and Li Wang Sect would know what to choose. Xiao Chen leaned lazily on a bamboo chair in the courtyard with Tianyu by his side. Seeing how calm Xiao Chen was, Gu Lingyao asked curiously, "Husband, aren't you worried at all when the 5 great sects' great sovereigns are discussing the division of benefits today?" "What's there to worry about? I've already done what I can. All that's left is to wait for the results," Xiao Chen chuckled softly. Xiao Chen had already done what he could, and the rest was not something he should worry about. While Xiao Chen was acting nonchalant, the great sovereigns of the 5 great sects had already gathered in the main hall of the Night Ghost Pavilion. Of course, the leaders were still Jiang Taishan, Tianju, Huanggu, and Lion Sect. The 4 of them sat at the head of the table, while the other great sovereigns sat on the sides below. Although they were the 5 great sects, Xiao Xing and the other 3 from the Sacred Palace were not on the same level as Jiang Taishan and the other 3. There were no Sacred Palace seats on the head of the table, which was a clear indication of the Sacred Palace's weakness. At the same time, Jiang Taishan was the first to speak. He first glanced at Lion Sect and smiled. "Lion Sect, I thought you wouldn't come." After all, the Myriad Beasts Valley doesn't seem to be interested in the Night Ghost Pavilion and the Evil Sky Hall. Lion Sect didn't need to come at all. After all, the division of benefits this time had nothing to do with the Myriad Beasts Valley. Lion Sect smiled faintly when he heard Jiang Taishan's words. "I'm just here to join in the fun." Lion Sect was only here to join in the fun, so Jiang Taishan didn't say anything else. He turned his gaze to the great sovereigns below. Jiang Taishan said indifferently, "After half a month of inventory, we've found out the properties and resources of the Night Ghost Pavilion and the Evil Sky Hall. There are 4 Foundation secret realms, 18 secret realms for cultivation, 180 spirit veins, 8 of which are supreme-grade spirit veins. As for the pills, talismans, and other things. I won't go into detail. There are a lot of them. Let's discuss the distribution of these things now. Jiang Taishan said calmly. As soon as he finished speaking, a great sovereign from the Liwang sect stood up and said, "Let's make things clear first. Before the distribution, I think we should make things clear first. This time, the distribution should be based on how much effort you put in. Only then will it be fair. Otherwise, it will be unfair to everyone. Distribute according to how much effort you put in." Everyone looked at Xiao Xing and the other three. These words were clearly directed at the sacred palace. After all, there was no one in the sacred palace who was at the great perfection of the quasi-saint realm. Moreover, Xiao Xing and the other three were the weakest in the quasi-saint realm. Only Xiao Xing was at the lesser completion of the quasi-saint realm. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendation. Chapter 1203. It was precisely because the sacred palace didn't have the slightest advantage at the level of quasi-saint great venerates that they were so passive in today's meeting that was completely composed of quasi-saint great venerate. In fact, they had been overshadowed the moment they arrived. According to the great sovereign, the sacred palace should have contributed the least, so the sacred palace should have received the least benefits. That's right, those who put in more effort should get a bigger share. Otherwise, it wouldn't be fair, the other supreme sovereign chimed in. I also agree. A third great sovereign chimed in. One after another, quasi-saint great sovereigns chimed in. Of course, these people were all from the Supreme Deity sect and Liwang sect. 9 Heavens and the Myriad Beast Valley had already reached an agreement with the sacred palace, so they naturally wouldn't add insult to injury. In the face of these great sovereigns' insistence on fairness, Xiao Xing and the other three remained calm and composed. Their faces didn't change in the slightest, nor did they refute, as if none of this had anything to do with them. Seeing that Xiao Xing and the other three had no intention of speaking, the great sovereign's eyes flashed with confusion. What was the sacred palace great sovereign doing? Could it be that they didn't understand the meaning behind his words? Xiao Xing and the other three remained silent. In the end, the first great sovereign to speak looked directly at Xiao Xing. "Brother Xiao Xing, does the sacred palace think we're right?" Since Xiao Xing and the other three remained silent, they had no choice but to make things clear. Xiao Xing looked indifferently at the great sovereign and said calmly, "What does it mean to contribute the most, and what does it mean to contribute the least? This naturally depends on the strength of each side. The stronger side will naturally contribute more, and the weaker side will naturally contribute less." The great sovereign chuckled. It was obvious that the sacred palace was the weakest among the 5 great sects, especially in the quasi-saint great venerate realm. Xiao Xing smiled when he heard this. "In that case, does everyone think that my sacred palace contributed the least in this battle?" Since they had already come to this point, there was no harm in getting straight to the point. Therefore, Xiao Xing did not beat around the bush and spoke very directly. Xiao Chen asked straightforwardly. Upon hearing this, the Supreme Venerate replied with a smile on his face. "I don't think there's a need for me to say this. Everyone present should have seen that the sacred palace has indeed contributed the least in this battle. After all, your sacred palace did not contribute at all to Ku Gui and Wan Shan. However, since we are allies, we will naturally not treat the sacred palace unfairly. I believe that the benefits that should be given to the sacred palace will not be small. What do you say, Brother Xiao Xing?" The meaning was very clear. Xiao Xing said indifferently, "In that case, let's see what the 4 great sovereigns think. I believe that the 4 great sovereigns will be very fair." Xiao Xing could not be bothered to waste his breath on this person. Since he was already prepared, he would directly throw the matter to Jiang Taishan and the other 3. Moreover, when he said this, Xiao Xing deliberately included the lion sect. The Myriad Beast Valley originally did not want to participate in the distribution of benefits this time. Now that Xiao Xing had said this, it was obvious that the Lion sect was also included and the four of them would decide. Unaware of the hidden meaning in Xiao Xing's words, the great sovereigns present all looked towards Jiang Taishan and the other three. Xiao Xing was right. Although the distribution of benefits this time seemed to be decided by the great sovereigns present, in reality, only Jiang Taishan and the other three had the right to decide. It was also because of this that the sacred palace was in such a passive position. The sacred palace did not have people at the level of Jiang Taishan, so they naturally did not have the right to speak and could only follow the arrangements of others. As expected, Jiang Taishan calmly said under everyone's gazes, "Everyone is right and very reasonable. However, I feel that since we are all allies, we should advance and retreat together. Although the sacred palace did not contribute much in this battle, they have worked hard even if they did not contribute much. Therefore, the benefits that should be divided will not be small." Jiang Taishan paused as his gaze fell on Xiao Xing and the other three. After pausing for a moment, Jiang Taishan continued. "How about this? The sacred palace will get 1 supreme-grade spirit vein and 10 mid-grade spirit veins from the Night Ghost Pavilion and the Evil Sky Hall. As for the pills and talismans, they will all be given to the sacred palace. After all, we are all allies and there are some things that do not need to be so clearly divided." Xiao Xing, Randeng, Binglian, and Mengjia's eyes flashed with anger when they heard Jiang Taishan's words. As for the great sovereigns of the Supreme Deity sect and Liwang sect, they all cupped their hands together and said, "We agree with the great sovereign's benevolence." The great sovereigns all agreed with Jiang Taishan's words. Moreover, from their expressions, they seemed to think that Jiang Taishan was being very benevolent and that the sacred palace was benefiting greatly. However, even Ming Yen could tell that Jiang Taishan's allocation was blatant bullying. He had directly skipped the distribution of benefits for the other three great sects and directly decided on the sacred palace's share. Moreover, from beginning to end, Jiang Taishan had not mentioned a single secret realm or secret cultivation area. In other words, the various industries and cultivation resources of the Night Ghost Pavilion and the Evil Sky Hall could not be obtained by the sacred palace, let alone secret realms. They did not even have a single secret cultivation area. The Night Ghost Pavilion and the Evil Sky Hall had a total of 4 secret realms and 18 secret cultivation areas. However, these did not seem to have anything to do with the sacred palace. As for the so-called supreme-grade spirit veins, pills, and talismans, they were not of much use at all. It seemed very generous of him to give all the pills and talismans of the 2 great sects to the sacred palace, but everyone present knew that these things were of little value. This was because pills and talismans could be refined by oneself, but secret realms and secret cultivation areas were the foundation of a sect's development. Without secret realms and secret cultivation areas, a sect could not develop at all. Relying on pills and talismans alone? That was simply a fool's dream. They had originally thought that no matter how greedy Jiang Taishan and the others were, they wouldn't give any secret zones to the sacred palace, but they should at least have cultivation secret zones. Who would have thought that Jiang Taishan wouldn't even give any secret zones to the sacred palace, as if the sacred palace couldn't do anything about it. It was no wonder that Xiao Xing and the others were furious. After working so hard for so long, they did not even get to eat the scraps and only drank the soup. Anyone would be furious if they were in Jiang Taishan's shoes. Therefore, Randeng also said in a low voice, "Isn't the great sovereign's actions a little too much? Please add, please vote, please recommend." Chapter 1204. Jiang Taishan's actions were indeed too much. Just because the sacred palace was weak and didn't have a perfect quasi-saint expert, Jiang Taishan was bullying them like this. Normally speaking, even if the sacred palace was weak and didn't have a perfect quasi-saint expert, the sacred palace didn't have the qualifications to claim secret areas. But no matter what, the sacred palace should have a share of the 18 cultivation secret areas. But now, Jiang Taishan wasn't even willing to give the sacred palace a share of the 18 secret areas, and not even a single one. Because of the anger in his heart, Ronding's tone became very stiff even in front of Jiang Taishan. A cold glint flashed across Jiang Taishan's eyes when he heard Ronding's words. However, at his level, he was able to conceal his emotions. Jiang Taishan didn't lose his temper, but instead, a supreme sovereign of the supreme sovereigns spoke up in a similarly cold tone. Randang, watch your tone. Your sacred palace didn't contribute much this time. What, do you think it's too little for the supreme sovereign to distribute it like this? Someone naturally stood up for Jiang Taishan before he even spoke up. Hearing this person's words, the masters present all had different expressions. The people of the Thousand Beasts Valley didn't care about the matter, while the people of the Nine Heavens all sat upright, as if they didn't care about the outside world. The supreme sovereigns of the Thousand Beasts Valley and Nine Heavens didn't speak, and the Liwang sect and Supreme Sovereign were clearly working together to oppress the Sacred Palace and reduce the Sacred Palace's benefits to the minimum. The secret areas and cultivation secret areas couldn't be given to the Sacred Palace, but the spirit veins, pills, and talismans of little value could be given to the Sacred Palace. They were completely treating the Sacred Palace as fools. It was an extremely unreasonable distribution, but from these people's words, it was as if the Sacred Palace had taken a huge advantage. Another Supreme Sovereign from the Power King sect chimed in after the Supreme Sovereign's words. Brother Shaoxing, there are some things that those who are content with what they have are happy with. Rewards should naturally be distributed according to the size of the contribution. Since the Sacred Palace contributed the least, the benefits should naturally be the least. Everyone spoke up one after another with the same attitude. Jiang Taishan's distribution was very good and fair, and the Sacred Palace didn't lose out. As if the Sacred Palace was already in the bag, the Supreme Sovereign of the Supreme Sovereign and Liwang sect were all full of confidence as they looked at Shao Xing's group of 4. In their opinion, this should be the end of today's matter. After dealing with the Sacred Palace, the Supreme Deity sect, Power King sect, and Nine Heavens would split the remaining secret realms and cultivation secret realms. The Supreme Sovereign of the Supreme Sovereign of the 3 sects was, and the Supreme Sovereign of course have a says of the Sacred Palace. The Supreme Sovereigns say, what do you think of Shaoxing? Estes of a Li Wang of St have s the house? Think teat have halves. TTS of s. If it's reasonable, then it's settled. Our 3 sects will discuss the next division later. Jiang Taishan's words were clearly a reminder to Tianju. His meaning was obvious. As long as Tianju nodded, Jiang Taishan would directly send the Sacred Palace away, and the remaining things would be divided among the 3 sections. In Jiang Taishan's opinion, Tianju definitely wouldn't refuse, and the Supreme Sovereigns below also thought the same. However, to everyone's surprise, Tianju indifferently spoke up after Jiang Taishan's voice faded. I don't think it's very fair. The Sacred Palace has contributed a lot, and this kind of distribution isn't appropriate. The Sacred Palace should have some secret areas and secret cultivation areas, but the Sacred Palace didn't get anything, and those pills and talismans can be said to be useless. Therefore, I think we should reconsider. This simple sentence stunned the quasi-saint Supreme Sovereign of the Supreme Sovereign and Liwang sect. Even Jiang Taishan was taken aback for a moment before looking at Tianju with a puzzled expression. What did this mean? Tianju was actually opposing them. Didn't he know that the 3 sects would only be able to obtain more benefits after sending the Sacred Palace away? Everyone originally thought that they had the Sacred Palace in their grasp, and that this time, the Sacred Palace could only suffer in silence. But who would have thought that Tianju would actually say such a thing at this time? It was simply unexpected. Jiang Taishan was puzzled, but he soon guessed something and unconsciously glanced at Xiao Xing and the others. Tianju's words at this time clearly indicated that he was on the sacred palace's side. In this case, there was only one explanation, and that was that 9 Heavens and the sacred palace had reached some kind of agreement. 9 Heavens would stand on the sacred palace's side in the division of benefit. Thinking of this, Jiang Taishan suddenly had a bad premonition and turned to look at Lion Sect. Since the sacred palace and 9 Heavens had reached some kind of agreement, then wouldn't the Myriad Beast Valley be even simpler? After all, the Myriad Beast Valley wasn't participating in the division of benefits this time, so it wouldn't be difficult for the sacred palace to win over the Myriad Beast Valley. Having already expected this, Lion Sect also laughed heartily in response to Jiang Taishan's gaze. Haha, this matter originally had nothing to do with my Myriad Beast Valley, but since I'm here, I naturally have something to say. We're all allies and have fought side by side before, so we can't go too far. The division must be fair. Don't you agree, Brother Jiang? Jiang Taishan's eyes narrowed slightly when he heard Lion Sect's words. As I thought. The development of the situation was somewhat unexpected. He originally thought that the sacred palace had no power to resist and could only accept it, but at this moment, it seemed that they were no longer in control. Tianju and Lion Sect spoke out one after another, all of them speaking up for the sacred palace. As such, Jiang Taishan naturally couldn't be stubborn. After all, Tianju and Lion Sect weren't afraid of Jiang Taishan. Falling into silence, Huanggu also fell into deep thought. He originally thought that it would be very easy to get rid of the sacred palace, but now it seemed that it would be a little difficult. Jiang Taishan was indeed a shrewd old man. After only a moment of silence, Jiang Taishan opened his mouth to speak. There was still a spring breeze-like smile on his face, as if he wasn't affected by Tianju and Lion Sect's words at all. Jiang Taishan looked towards Xiao Xing and said with a smile, Haha, since everyone disagrees with the division just now, let's discuss it again. We're all allies, so it's very normal to have disagreements. Brother Xiao Xing, how about this? Why don't the sacred palace decide what division you think is fair? Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. If you want to chat about Sword Master of 8 Desolations with more like-minded people, follow Excellent Literature on WeChat. Chat about life, find a confidant. Chapter 1205. Jiang Taishan took the initiative to ask for Xiao Xing's opinion. This was something that no one had ever thought of before. Of course, it was also because Tianju and the Lion Sect had spoken. With these two around, Jiang Taishan naturally could not continue to be stubborn. Hearing Jiang Taishan's words, Xiao Xing only said one sentence. As long as it's fair. He did not specify how the distribution would be done, as long as it was fair. Xiao Xing's words put Jiang Taishan in a difficult position. Jiang Taishan was also unable to deal with the current situation, but Tianju took the initiative to speak up. How about this? The Liwang sect and the Supreme God sect will each have one, while the Sacred Palace will have 2. As for 9 Heavens, we won't need it. After all, the alliance this time was initiated by the Sacred Palace. Moreover, the Sacred Palace is newly established and is in great need of secret zones, so we'll let them have 2 secret zones. As for cultivation secret zones, the 3 of us will each have 5, while the Sacred Palace will have 3. As for the other spirit veins, properties, pills, talismans and so on, we'll divide them equally. What does Brother Jiang think? Tianju took the initiative to speak. Jiang Taishan was clearly taken aback. This wasn't because Tianju's allocation wasn't fair enough. On the contrary, it was very fair. However, Jiang Taishan hadn't expected that Tianju would give up a secret domain of his own accord and give it to the sacred palace. The fairest distribution of the 4 secret zones was naturally one for each of the 4 great sections. But now, the Supreme God sect and the Liwang sect each had a secret zone of their own, but 9 heavens had given it up and given it to the sacred palace. Jiang Taishan had not expected this at all. Of course, he clearly did not know the conditions of the sacred palace and 9 heavens. According to the agreement between the 2 sides, 9 heavens could send people to cultivate in these 2 secret zones for the next 100 years. Therefore, it was not a loss for 9 heavens. However, Tianju naturally could not tell Jiang Taishan about this. Tianju looked at Jiang Taishan with a slight smile and waited for his reply. It was only after a long while that Jiang Taishan revealed a somewhat unnatural smile. "Brother Tianju, you're really surprising. Is 9 heavens really willing to give up on a secret realm? Since we are allies, we naturally have to help each other. What do you think of my proposal, Brother Jiang?" Tianju smiled indifferently. 9th heaven was determined to give him an inheritance. Hearing this, Jiang Taishan looked at the ancient Desolate and Lion sect and asked, "What do you 2 think?" Although the Myriad Beasts Valley wasn't participating in the distribution of benefits this time, Jiang Taishan obviously couldn't ignore the Lion sect. Hearing Jiang Taishan's words, Lion sect was the first to speak with a smile. "I feel that Brother Tianju's suggestion is not bad. After all, it's 9 heavens' business to give up on their own accord. There's no loss to the Supreme Deity sect and Liwang sect. Don't you think so, Brother Huanggu?" The Lion sect would definitely agree, and what he said was also correct. 9 heavens was willing to give up an inheritance to the Saint Palace, but that was their business. It had nothing to do with the Supreme Deity sect or the Power King sect. There were a total of 4 inheritances. Putting aside the Myriad Beasts Valley, the fairest distribution method was naturally the Supreme Deity sect, Liwang sect, 9 heavens, and the Sacred Palace. Now that the Supreme Deity sect and Liwang sect had each been given an inheritance, there was nothing wrong with 9 heavens giving their quota to the Sacred Palace. A strange look flashed across the ancient Desolate's eyes. There was no problem with Tianju's distribution plan. The 4 great sects would all receive the most fair distribution. At the same time, the ancient Desolate could accept such a result. It would naturally be better if they could obtain more benefits, but looking at the current situation, it might be a little difficult. 9 heavens and the Myriad Beasts Valley had made it clear that they were determined to advance and retreat together with the Sacred Palace. If things became too stiff, it would not end well. Thinking of this, the ancient Desolate did not act rashly and smiled faintly. "Since the Lion sect agrees, I also agree with Brother Tianju." Both the Lion sect and the ancient Desolate had agreed to Tianju's proposal. Jiang Taishan actually had no other choice, but he still asked Shaoxing, "Brother Shaoxing, what does the Sacred Palace think?" "We naturally have no objections," Shaoxing indifferently replied. The Sacred Palace naturally had no objections to such a distribution. Although the 2 heritage inheritances had to give 3 places to 9 heavens every year, and the Sacred Palace was only given 3 cultivation secret realms, while the Supreme Deity sect and the other 2 sects were given 5 each, this was already the best result. At least, it was much better than Shaoxing and the others had expected. Shaoxing also nodded in agreement. Although Jiang Taishan was a little unhappy, he did not show it on his face and smiled at the various great sovereigns present. "In that case, we will distribute according to Brother Tianju's proposal. In the following time, the various sects should prepare to receive their share of the benefit." The situation was completely out of Jiang Taishan's expectations. He no longer had much interest in the matter, and after a few casual words, the crowd dispersed. The distribution of benefits between the Night Ghost Pavilion and the Evil Sky Hall had been decided, and the result was naturally eye-popping. Without knowing the inside story, the Sacred Palace was undoubtedly the biggest winner this time. Although the Sacred Palace had 2 fewer cultivation secret realms than the other 3 great sects, they had 1 more heritage secret realm. The value of a heritage secret realm was obviously not something that 2 cultivation secret realms could compare to. Therefore, the Sacred Palace was undoubtedly the biggest winner this time. The disciples of the 4 great sects were all extremely puzzled because they had not expected such a result. On the other hand, Shao Chen, who was in his residence, was very calm when he heard the news. He was not surprised at all by the result. Seeing Shao Chen so calm, the Azure Emperor, Bai Yi and the other Sacred Palace chosen who had rushed over after hearing the news looked at Shao Chen strangely. "Senior brother Shao Chen, aren't you excited at all? Our Sacred Palace is the biggest winner this time." Shao Chen's performance was simply too calm, which puzzled everyone. Hearing this, Shao Chen smiled faintly and said, "That's right. I already expected this result." Everything had been planned by Shao Chen. With the help of the 1,000 Beasts Valley and 9 Heavens, this result was naturally not surprising. However, the only flaw was that in order to persuade 9 Heavens, the Sacred Palace had also made a promise. Although the 2 heritage secret realms seemed to belong to the Sacred Palace, half of them still belonged to 9 Heavens. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendation. Chapter 1206. The 2 secret zones seemed to belong solely to the Sacred Palace, but 9 Heavens still wanted a share of the profit. It was because of this that 9 Heavens had chosen to give one of its secret zones to the Sacred Palace. Of course, no matter what, this was already the best outcome for the Sacred Palace. With these 2 secret zones, the Sacred Palace's foundation could grow rapidly, which was what the Sacred Palace needed the most right now. As for some small losses, there was nothing they could do about it. After all, the Sacred Palace was weak. It was good that others could help you with many things, but in the end, it all depended on you. For example, if the Sacred Palace had a supreme sovereign at the perfect stage of the quasi-saint stage, there would be no need for them to ally with 9 Heavens and the myriad Beast Valley. The Sacred Palace alone would be enough to deal with these matters. They were still weaker, so some losses were necessary. After all, 9 Heavens wouldn't help them for no reason. There was no need to fuss over these matters. The day after the meeting, Shao Chen and the other Sacred Palace chosen returned to the Sacred Palace. As for Shao Xing and the other patriarchs, as well as the Sacred Palace Saint Sovereigns, they were going to the Night Ghost Pavilion and 9 Heavens to receive the benefit. These benefits could allow the Sacred Palace to rise to a higher level in a short period of time. If it weren't for these benefits, the 5 great sects wouldn't have joined forces to destroy the Night Ghost Pavilion and Demonic Sky Palace. After a round of selection, the Sacred Palace finally chose 2 secret domains. They were the Night Ghost Pavilion's Ghost Realm and the Demonic Sky Palace's Black Demon Mountain. These 2 heritage places were the most effective for the human race, so Shao Chen naturally chose these 2 secret realms. The Ghost Realm was relatively all-round. It was helpful for the cultivation of the physical body, cultivation, and martial skills. It could be said to be a secret domain without any obvious flaws. As for the Black Demon Mountain, its greatest use was to help people improve their cultivation. This was something the Sacred Palace urgently needed. The 2 secret domains and 3 cultivation secret domains would be personally moved to the Sacred Palace by Shao Xing and the others. From now on, they would be the Sacred Palace's cultivation secret domains for the many disciples to cultivate in. Since they didn't need to care about these matters, Shao Chen and the others naturally returned to the Sacred Palace first. Everyone was in a good mood when they returned to the Sacred Palace. After this battle, the Night Ghost Pavilion and the Evil Sky Palace had been destroyed, and the power structure of the North Star boundary had changed drastically. The Sacred Palace could be considered as a true powerhouse in the North Star boundary. At the same time, the benefits they had gained from this battle filled everyone with hope for the Sacred Palace's future. The spaceship slowly entered the holy region and stopped at the main square. Xiao Chun and the rest disembarked and parted ways. Xiao Chun brought Tianyu, Qin Shuru, and the other 2 girls back to his cave abode. After resting for more than 2 hours and washing up, Xiao Chun brought the 4 girls to the courtyard where Bai Ruiyue and Xiao Qing lived. The 2 elders naturally heaved a sigh of relief when they saw that everyone was safe. The 2 elders were naturally worried about everyone's safety during the fierce battle with the Night Ghost Pavilion and the Evil Sky Palace. However, everything was fine now. Xiao Chun had returned safely, and the 4 girls were not in any danger. That night, Xiao Chun accompanied the 2 elders for a meal. Of course, Chun Ling and Long Qing also came. However, Xiao Chun felt that Chun Ling was a little strange today. When they were drinking, he was always absent-minded. There were a few times when he was distracted and didn't even respond when Xiao Chun called him. Sensing Chun Ling's strangeness, the group bid farewell to the 2 elders after they were full. Just as Chun Ling and Long Qing were about to leave, Xiao Chun suddenly called out to them. "Big brother, second sister, wait a moment." "What's wrong, little brother?" Hearing Xiao Chen's words, Long Qing asked in a normal manner. Hearing this, Xiao Chen didn't say much. He smiled and said, "We haven't talked alone for a long time. Do you want to come to my place?" He took the initiative to invite the 2 to his residence. Long Qing didn't refuse, and Chun Ling nodded silently. The group quickly arrived at Xiao Chen's residence. Tian Yu and the other girls were very sensible and didn't bother with their own matters. Fei Mei and Lan also respectfully left after making tea for the 3 of them. Soon, only Xiao Chun and his siblings were left in the front hall. Without any outsiders, Xiao Chun directly asked Chun Ling, "Big brother, what's wrong with you today? Is there something on your mind?" Chun Ling was obviously in the wrong today, which was why Xiao Chun invited the 2 of them here. He wanted to clarify if Chun Ling had encountered any trouble. If there was trouble, Xiao Chun naturally wouldn't stand by and do nothing. After hearing Xiao Chen's words, Chun Ling revealed an expression that said, "As expected, you still came to ask." Then, he sighed and said, "Third brother, aren't you very curious about my hometown?" "I am very curious. What's wrong?" Hearing this, Xiao Chen asked curiously. "Then let me tell you today. My hometown isn't in the North Star Realm. It's in the Central World." Previously, Xiao Chen had asked Chun Ling about his hometown more than once, but unfortunately, Chun Ling had evaded every time. But today, Chun Ling actually took the initiative to talk about this matter. Xiao Chen was naturally puzzled, but after hearing Chun Ling's narration, Xiao Chen also calmed down and listened attentively. Chun Ling's understanding of this world was clearly much clearer than Xiao Chen's. It could even be said that even Jiang Taishan, Tianju, the Primordial, and the Lion Sect, the #1 great sovereigns, didn't understand this world as well as Chun Ling. The simplest thing was that they didn't know anything beyond the North Star Realm. According to Chun Ling, this world had a total of 4 star realms, which were the North Star Realm, the South Star Realm, the East Star Realm, and the West Star Realm. In addition to these 4 star realms, there was also the Central World located in the center of these 4 star realms. The 4 star realms were about the same size, and they were separated into 4 sides of the Central World. At the end of each star realm was a layer of restriction known as the horizon limit. The horizon limit was set up by the heavenly Tao in order to stabilize the space of the 4 star realms. Therefore, experts above the Saint Realm were unable to travel between the 4 star realms through the horizon limit. It was also because of this that the 4 star realms could be said to be completely independent existences. As for the Central World, it was an incomparably huge continent without the so-called endless starry sky. However, such a continent's area exceeded the area of the 4 star realms combined. One continent was larger than the 4-star realms combined. One could imagine how vast such a continent was. And Chunling's hometown, or rather, his home, was in the central world. Please collect, please vote, please recommend. Chapter 1207. Listening to Chunling's story, this was the first time Xiao Chun had heard about matters outside of the North Star boundary. He remembered that when he first came into contact with the North Star boundary, Xiao Chun had thought that he was a frog at the bottom of a well. This was because compared to the entire North Star boundary, whether it was the heavenly Chen continent or the Tianhe continent, they were like a drop in the ocean. In his mind, the North Star boundary could be said to be extremely vast. But now, Chunling was telling him that outside of the North Star boundary, there were 3 other star boundaries, as well as the central world, which was even more vast than the 4-star boundaries. Chunling's words undoubtedly shocked Xiao Chun to the extreme. At the same time, it overturned all of Xiao Chun's previous knowledge. After briefly introducing the North Star boundary, the South Star boundary, the East Star boundary, the West Star boundary, and the central world, Chunling did not continue. This was because he needed to give Xiao Chun some time to digest. He took a sip of tea and looked at the stunned Xiao Chun and Long Qing. Chunling smiled faintly and did not rush the two of them. For the two of them who did not understand the outside world at all, hearing these things for the first time was indeed a huge shock. Now, the two of them needed time to digest these things. After waiting quietly for a while, Xiao Chun finally took a deep breath and said, "The 4-star boundaries and the central world. Is this the true appearance of the world we live in?" Whether it was the former heavenly Qin continent, the Tianhe continent, or the current North Star boundary, compared to the real world, they were all just a part of it. As he understood this world, Xiao Chun became more and more amazed at the profoundness and vastness of this world. However, at the same time as he was shocked, Xiao Chun also became more determined to become stronger. This was because only by becoming stronger could he truly understand this world and travel to every place in this world. Think about it, an ordinary person without cultivation would not be able to leave the heavenly Chen continent in his lifetime, let alone the North Star boundary. A cultivator with ordinary talent would only be able to travel in the North Star boundary in his lifetime. Only the true dragons and phoenixes would have the opportunity to step on the stage of this world and meet and compete with various geniuses. After taking a deep breath and whispering softly, Xiao Chen looked at Chunling and said with a smile, "Big brother, there must be a lot of experts in the central world, right?" "Yes, a lot." Hearing Xiao Chen's words, Chunling nodded and replied, "There are more great emperors of the great saint realm, not to mention the half-step great saints, quasi-saints, and saints. In the vast central world, there were as many experts as there were clouds. Geniuses were even more numerous. There were more saints and saintesses and saints and saintesses. There were more than 100 saints and saintesses. There were more than 100 of them saints and saintesses. Although the central world was so big, there were only 100 saints and saintesses. The number seems small, but the saints and saintesses of the central world could not be compared to the saints and saintesses of the 4 major astral realms. The biggest difference between the two was that the saints and saintesses of the 4 major astral realms were selected by their respective sex. However, in the central world, the sex, even the great saint's sex, were not qualified to confer the title of saint or saintess. In the central world, there was only one way to become a saint or saintess, and that was to challenge the saint ranking. Only those who left their names on the saint ranking were qualified to become a saint or saintess of the central world. Otherwise, no one would recognize you as a saint or saintess. There were more than 50 saints and sovereigns. After hearing Chunling's words, Xiao Chun could not help but gasp. This was simply too sensational. There had not been a great saint in the North Star realm for tens of thousands of years. However, there were more than 50 such existences in the central world. Xiao Chun was shocked once again, but this time, he quickly came back to his senses. His eyes flashed with a strong sense of excitement. Big brother, one day, we will go back to the central world, right? He had a strong yearning for the central world. If he could really go to the center of the world one day, where there were as many experts as there were clouds and saints as there were rain, how delightful would that be? To put it bluntly, the fights in the North Star realm were just small skirmishes. However, the central world was the center of this world, and the experts there were the real leaders of this era. Xiao Chun had always yearned to be able to fight with these real geniuses. Chun Ling smiled when he saw that Xiao Chun had regained his composure so quickly and was not depressed at all. Instead, he had an eager expression on his face. Don't worry, we will be able to go there soon. Today I want to talk to you about something else, not this. What Chun Ling really wanted to say was not this, but Xiao Chun and Long Qing did not have much understanding of the outside world. In order to better explain what was going to happen next, Chun Ling had no choice but to briefly introduce the 4 major star realms and the central world to the two of them. Finally, it was time to talk about the main topic. At this time, Chun Ling also straightened his face and his tone was not as calm as before. On the contrary, it became a little dignified. Actually, what I want to tell you is an ancient prophecy passed down in the central divine realm, or rather, the rules of this world. Prophecy? Rules. Hearing this, Xiao Chun and Long Qing were both puzzled. In the face of the two's puzzlement, Chun Ling did not keep them in suspense and explained. A long time ago, this world did not have the so-called central world and the 4 major star realms. At that time, the entire world was an incomparably huge continent, much bigger than the current central world. At that time, the 100 races lived on this continent. However, as the 100 races cultivated, the origin energy between heaven and earth was quickly consumed. That era could be said to be the most glorious era. Not to mention that great saints were everywhere, but the number of great saints among the 100 races was definitely more than 1,000 or even more. It was precisely because of this terrifying consumption that the rules of heaven and earth forcibly separated the original world in order to preserve the origin energy, which resulted in the formation of the central world and the 4 major star realms. Usually, the 5 sides did not have much contact, but this forced separation was also the rules of heaven and earth for self-preservation. However, at the same time, after the world was forcibly separated, every few 100,000 years, the 4 major star realms and the central world would once again merge into one, forming the original appearance of the world. Once again converging into a complete continent, the 100 races would coexist. At the same time, the rules of heaven would also deliberately arrange for the 100 races to attack each other. This was the widely spread 100 race war in the central world. Chapter 1208. After hearing Chun Ling's words during the 100 race war, Xiao Chun and Long Qing fell into deep thought. They had never thought that there would be such a thing. The heavenly Tao rules would split the world into 5 parts. Looking at the two deep in thought, Chun Ling did not say anything more. In fact, there was one thing that Chun Ling did not tell the two of them. Every time there was a 100 race war, the victorious race would receive unimaginable benefit. And such benefits were bestowed by the heavenly Tao rules. No one knew why the heavenly Tao rules were like this, but one thing was certain. Any race that received such benefits could at least become a powerful race. For example, the beast race, demon race, god race, ghost race, barbarian race, heaven race, and so on. These races had all won at least 100 race war. Even the human race was the same. However, according to what Chun Ling knew, the human race had only won once in the 100 race war. The reason why the human race was able to win that time was because an absolutely terrifying figure had appeared in the human race. He was called the Human Emperor by the world. It was because of his leadership that the human race had won that 100-race war. It was only that one time, but the human race had succeeded in rising. Although the human race was still weak in front of old and powerful races like the god race and demon race, at least they had a certain right to speak and some power to contend with them. These were the benefits of winning the 100-race war. The strongest people of the victorious races would also receive rewards from the heavenly Tao rules. However, without exception, these people who received special rewards from the heavenly Tao rules all mysteriously disappeared in the end. There were rumors that they had broken through to the great saint realm and reached an unimaginable level. This world could not withstand their power, so they went to a higher plane. This was only a guess. As for the truth, no one knew. Chunling did not tell Xiaochen and Long Qing about these things. The two of them were still too far away from these things. If they wanted to have the ability to influence the 100-race war, they needed to at least break through to the Great Saint Realm. One must know that once the 100-races war broke out, even quasi-saints couldn't be considered top-notch experts. Only those true the great sage had the right to speak and the ability to influence the entire war situation. After pondering for a while, in the end, it was still Xiao Chen who recovered first. Looking at Chunling, Xiao Chen said softly, "Big brother, you mean that very soon, our 5 worlds will merge together again? When the time comes, we will gather in the central world." "That's right." When the time comes, all the continents of the 4 major astral realms will be forcefully merged into the central world, forming an incomparably huge continent, forming the original appearance of this world. The War of the 100 Clans will begin. Hearing this, Chunling nodded slightly. This was the arrangement of the heavenly Tao, and no one could resist it. In this world, even the great sage did not have the ability to challenge the heavenly Tao. He had learned something incredible from Chunling, and this matter concerned the 4 major astral realms as well as everyone in the central world. No matter if you had cultivation or not, there was no way to avoid it. Taking a deep breath, Xiao Chen finally said, "It's best to tell the 4 patriarchs about this matter as soon as possible so that they can be prepared." Since Chunling knew about this, he should tell Xiao Sheng and the other 4 patriarchs so that the sacred palace could make preparations in advance. Chunling nodded in agreement to Xiao Chen's suggestion. Subsequently, the 3 of them chatted for a while more before going their separate ways. After sending off Chunling and Long Qing, Xiao Chen's eyes flashed with excitement. The War of the 100 Races and the Central World had shocked Xiao Chen, but more than that, he was excited. To be able to stand on the same stage as the true geniuses of the various races who had lived in the Central World since childhood was a huge challenge for Xiao Chen, but at the same time, it was also a huge temptation. In the North Star world, Xiao Chen already stood at the top of the younger generation. Although Xiao Chen could not guarantee 100% victory against the other first saints, there were not many people in the younger generation who could make Xiao Chen fear. Although Chunling did not say much earlier, Xiao Chen still heard some things. Compared to the saints and saintesses of the 4 major astral realms, the saints and saintesses of the central world were the truly terrifying existences. If the saints and saintesses of the 4 major astral realms went to the central world, they could only be fake saints and saintesses. In addition to yearning for the mysterious central world, Xiao Chen was also full of curiosity about the realm above the Great Saint Realm. From Chunling's words, it was not difficult for Xiao Chen to guess that the Great Saint Realm was definitely not the limit of martial arts. Although there had never been anyone above the Great Saint Realm in this world, it did not mean that the Great Saint Realm was the limit of martial arts. There were definitely higher realms above it. It seems that the saying that martial arts have no end is true. Soon, he came back to his senses. At the same time, after returning, Xiao Chen truthfully told Tianyue, Qin Shuru, Fei Mei, Qin Yao, and the other girls about this matter. After hearing this news from Xiao Chen, the girls were extremely shocked. It took them almost 2 hours to come back to their senses. Xiao Chen was not too surprised by the girls' shock. This matter was too sensational, but fortunately, with Xiao Chen by their side, although the girls were shocked, they were not too timid and afraid. The reason was very simple. In the hearts of the girls, as long as Xiao Chen was there, it did not matter where they were. Because as long as they were with Xiao Chen, the girls' hearts were very stable and they felt very safe. After briefly telling the girls about this matter, the next day, Xiao Chen also brought Long Qing and Chen Ling to find Xiao Xing and the other 4 old ancestors. He did not tell the 4 that Chen Ling was the reincarnation of a mighty person. This was also Chen Ling's idea. He casually found an excuse, and only said that Chen Ling saw a record in a secret realm. He truthfully told Xiao Xing and the other 3 about the central world and the 4 major astral realms. At first, the 4 of them were still a little skeptical. After all, this matter was too shocking. In the end, it was only after Xiao Chen's strong persuasion that Xiao Xing and the other 4 were still half convinced. Old ancestor, this matter is very serious, so no matter what, it's better to believe it's true than not. Moreover, even if this record is fake, there's no loss for us to take some precautions in advance, right? Xiao Chen looked at Xiao Xing and the other 3 and said. It was obvious that the 4 of them did not quite believe it, so Xiao Chen said this. After hearing this, the 4 of them were silent for a moment. Then, Xiao Xing said with a serious expression, Chen is right. This matter is too serious, so it's better to believe it's true than not and make preparations in advance. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendation. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.